So while Al's settling and the rest of us can introduce ourselves, I'm Kathleen.
I'm Andrea.
I'm Lloyd.
I'm Sean.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Casey LeMay with RWD.
And Terry Allred, I'm with the bank.
And some of us have been with Mr. Allred before when M&T modified the base on the sign.
Oh, of course, right.
A
And
couple
our-
of times, I think, I've been there.
That's the one I remember. And our chairman, Al Skolinski.
So, just for
That's
more.
okay, that's right, it's my power, sorry.
Okay. Call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome Lloyd Brisset. He's the latest addition to our board. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay. So, we'll start with the first application, 40 Chestnut Street, M&T Bank. I have a motion concerning the secret status.
Move that as a type 2 action, a minor change.
Do I have a second?
I have a second.
All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Okay, so basically, it's an insert into a window, right?
Into the portion of the driveway window. And it's not a standalone project in that M&T is replacing ATMs across our footprint at a fairly fast pace, changing from D-Bolt to NCR. And we have a couple of cases here and in Kingston where the service spacing on the new ATM just doesn't fit the existing arrangement.
Oh, like out in the entryway? Doesn't
Not
fit.
the entryway, but on the backside where the tech services machine, it requires window.
Got it.
So we've been pursuing these two, and in the case of Cold Spring, generally our preference would be to install a drive-up ATM wherever possible, just because of security. The customer is a lot more inclined to feel that they're in control when the Cold Spring branch is a very small vestibule. When you go in, there's no real privacy, whether it's daytime or evening, somebody else walks up to come back in. The other problem that we encounter, and the reason we're trying to go the direction we are, is that the line of sight where the ATM that goes into the building, it's into an enclosure kind of around the end of the teller line, and that currently creates a line of sight deficiency from the teller line to see who's coming in the door.
Ah,
Mhm.
hadn't thought about
You're
that.
black.
Yeah.
You don't see them until they're actually into the building, and again, safety concern, security. Bumping the ATM servicing area and you get deeper, taking another teller window out, just really complicates that visibility to a degree where we feel that the drive-up approach is much better, where it's sitting behind the teller line for servicing.
So what is happening with that portion, separate and apart from what's going in the window? That area of the building is an exterior wall that's had the vestibule added, right? And you can see into, or is the vestibule original to that building?
Good question. It's an old Premier Bank, Fishkill National, I think at one time. I'm not sure what the original vestibule arrangement was.
I'm asking the question, wondering if it's A, visible from the public right of way, and because it's a glass vestibule.
Well, the glass vestibule is visible. I mean, if you're walking along Chestnut Street, then certainly it is visible, but I mean,
I don't think it is visible.
I-
There's a masonry wall
yeah, but you can,
facing
can
the
see it.
street. Because this is Chestnut down here.
right.
Right, but it's a public parking lot.
Oh, sure.
Well, then also if you're walking along Chestnut Street, fine, you know, if you're right due west of of that, you won't, what you'll see is the brick wall, but then if you go past that, you can see into that. I use M&T, so I'm familiar with that facility. And certainly you can see who's in there and who's not.
Well, what I'm mindful about is that this is people feel differently about 20th century buildings. For us in the village, this building is a gem, because we have very little from this time period, and I'm raising the question because this is the original exterior wall that is still visible. I don't know, maybe the vestibule was always there, but if this comes down, then you're, I don't know. I'm concerned about the loss of, not the loss, but that this portion be handled, when you take out the ATM here, that this portion be handled sensitively along that wall, because you will see in. Am I making sense?
Yeah, what is the plan for when the ATM is removed?
Well, currently we have brick that would be, so if you were coming around where the window is, there's gonna be brick that would be
You're taking
removed
out.
there, so we
Mhm.
could take that brick there and put it over in the place of the hole that's going to be located where the ATM is existing. So we could pull that
Ah,
one out,
Okay.
use the existing brick in the existing place.
I was understanding what you meant, misunderstanding what you meant. I thought you were saying that you were taking out this portion completely so that the tellers can see through, that this interior wall would go away.
Oh, no.
No, I think it's.
You're just
The
infilling.
greatest change could be that this would go away.
Got it, okay. I misunderstood, my apologies.
And that's another project down the road that this branch is going along with a large number of other branches, is getting a refresh. New carpet, new paint, new furniture, although this has relatively new furniture, the color plan will be a slight makeover.
Well, by the time you get to here, you're squarely in the interior and then it's none of our business.
Right.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
Anybody have any questions?
I just wondered how the trim, how you were going to deal with meeting the brick and edging the brick, because you're obviously going to end up with portions of,
So, the way that it's set up now, the existing drive-through is gonna go bump out.
yep.
And when you take that window out,
Mhm.
the window itself sits back just a little bit from the edge of that bump out. So after we remove that window, that new surround will cover the entire space. It'll sit flush against the edge of the brick. Flush is in as tight as the surround can go to the brick, meaning
Uh-huh.
the actual surround, they're about 3/16 thick.
It's a thin panel.
It's a pretty thin panel, and you would take just a clear silicone to seal that from the weather,
Okay.
so you wouldn't really.
So it's not really sitting proud of the brick face very much at all.
Right, you wouldn't
Got
notice. The only thing that's on there that is a little proud, the actual, and you can see the dimensions of the light box that's on
On
top.
top,
It shows the
Uh-huh. Yeah,
section through the.
yep, I'm just getting there.
Cast some light down
Right.
onto the face of the ATM.
Yeah, which we can see that's
You can see that.
roughly 2 inches.
This is helpful too, thanks for bringing that.
Yeah, this is this isn't a rendering, but this is actually one that we've done before in a different area. And it's got the brick
Yeah.
facade, so I figured this is fairly close to what you're gonna see.
Okay.
But here,
Well,
in this
and-
case, it will, sorry, in this case, it will be just the height of this window, or is it gonna come all the way down to where the drop box is?
So the actual surround is 90 inches tall. It would go from the top
Yeah,
of the bump out all the way down to the bottom where the curve is. So it would be the full height.
Okay, now, what you described, this is the bump out, rather, this is the final product, and it's gonna come all the way down to the ground, right?
Correct.
But the thing is that you do have brick below the window. So it's got, then this, unless you're taking the brick out, this is proud of that.
Correct. Yeah, it's about 3/16 proud of it.
Okay,
the actual brick itself.
so it is sticking out in front.
But you mentioned that you're taking the brick out and you're going to reuse that on the other side.
On the bottom portion of that window,
The area where, around the drop box.
correct.
So is it gonna be set in, or is it gonna be,
It's
Proud.
gonna sit flat, well, it's gonna be proud of it by about 3/16.
okay,
And that's where you take the silicone along that edge and put a silicone to,
you're talking about
Weather
along
sealer.
the
Correct.
yes.
two sides?
So is the panel, the front panel around the ATM, is that, it's sort of on top of
Brick facade.
the brick and the frame?
The frame will be removed. So the frame of the window and everything, the way that those windows are made, I can go right from that center mullion where it is,
Take half of
Left
the window.
eye.
take
Yeah.
that whole half right out.
And the other window is undamaged.
Yes, correct. Yep.
Lucky that you can.
Yeah, I've done this quite a few times before, so we've got some experience in taking those windows out.
All right, any other questions?
None.
I would move to accept it as submitted.
I would second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Done.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. Thanks for making the drive down.
Thank you, guys.
I have a question. Does it M&T own this building?
Yeah.
They don't rent it? Okay. I don't think I knew that last time. Good to know.
Have a good night. Good
Okay.
safe trip back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
So 9D or not 9D? Is there a
Well,
consensus?
is 90, do we know if 90 is still
90.
closed?
No, it's open.
90's open. There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
It was the press right here.
Well, I mean, I drove on it today, so.
I heard a fire truck going by like around 7:30 and
if you
thought it
get-
was starting up again.
If you're gonna need to turn back, you won't be far out of the village, so
Sure.
it'll be an easy turnaround. Oops, I think I put my, oh, no, it's right. See ya.
Thank you.
Bye.
Here, Al, sorry, I didn't write down names.
Oh. You were holding out because
I-
you want to take it home.
As fast as I could.
Uh-huh.
I don't know where the contractor is going, but,
Albany.
Alden? Oh.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Give everybody your documents. Do you have this one? You
I
have
have everything, yeah.
I forgot it. So you probably met everyone but Lloyd.
Hello.
Hi.
Good to meet you.
Oh, we're not supposed to.
We're not supposed
I'm not. I actually haven't met you before.
Sean.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Oh,
meet
gosh.
you.
You look familiar, but I don't know.
Do we have a photo of these guys?
Yeah, it's in there somewhere. Should be on top of the bottom set. You know, I'll look, when we get done, I'll go through so we can wait, just to make sure we have.
It was kind of a bit confusing because there's three different drafts, there's three different ones. so
Oh, this
maybe
is the last application.
Oh, okay. Ours is there then.
Yeah, yours is
Okay.
there. And that's the revised one that sends you to the
The third
ZBA
revised
and,
one.
yeah.
Okay, so tell us what you're proposing.
I don't know, I guess you can just jump in, what do you wanna do?
Go ahead, and
So-
if I
Jump in,
jump in, I
okay.
will.
You're good. So just to clarify, this application has, well, it really has three parts, but there's two parts. A part that has to do with the house and a part that has to do with the barn in the back. And Beth and Paul are the architects for the barn project in the back. And the house project is just something I can talk to you about. So the gist of the project is that we would like to make a second story addition over the first story of our house, which is in the historic district, et cetera, we've been before you before. It's in the rear of the structure, so it would be hardly visible from the street. And it the zoning board was fine with this, and it would just mirror all the existing things on our house already that you guys have approved already when we did the lower part of the addition. We didn't know we would have so many kids, and so we should have done this upper addition. And now we're throwing big money after that and doing the top. Everything with the trim, et cetera, would be matching, that sort of thing. It's fairly simple. The little brackets would match the many that are already on our house. We still have the pattern for them. And then the second part of it, the application is a little bit complicated. We have an old barn in the back of our house that was built around the turn of the century, and we knew when we bought it, it was one of the reasons why we bought the house, and we knew that we would have to address its structural decay at some point, but we thought it would be maybe a long time. It was substantially rebuilt in the 1990s to 2000s, and by substantially I mean almost entirely rebuilt. The only extant historic fabric on the structure is in the front facade. There's, I don't know if they're original, but there's older, the barn doors are older. Do you have them?
These are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces of original fabric. The window seems to be original, this cross brace here, this piece, and the barn doors?
The barn doors we're not sure about.
Sure.
They don't have the same kind of hardware on them that these posts do, but anyway, they're in a state of decay on the bottom, and every other post and things that have been replaced on the barn are significantly decaying. I think we brought a few photos of it. So our initial hope was that we could just cheaply sort of save the structure, et cetera, but when it became clear that this was like a giant project, we decided to just sort of start over if we can get permission to do so from scratch and build it the right way. It's just structurally not, there's non-pressure treated members that go all the way into the ground that are completely rotten. It was sort of seemed like it was kind of a home job, whoever did it. And it was fine, they were trying to save the structure too, but it's caused a lot more problems than it solved in a very short amount of time. And so we'd like to add on a small addition to the side. We'd like to demo the building, rebuild it over substantially the same footprint, a little tiny bit taller, a little tiny bit wider, like by a foot or two. And then make a small L addition that's only 9 feet wide to the back of the barn, and you have those in your plans, I think. So you could see that the addition would be just this, on the side would be an L. And before we talk about the details of the project, I wanted to give you guys a little history of the structures on the property, because I feel like they're important as we discuss what this barn may have looked like. Again, we don't know what it looks like. The only clues we have are this little tiny bit of fabric that's left. It could have had a cupola on it. It could have looked all different. And I've been doing some research in the Hutton History Museum trying to find photos, and I haven't found any yet. So if I do, it will change this process. But so my house is interesting because originally it was built around 1840, and it was one small lot. And then in 1847, when George Haight bought it, he bought from Mary Guffner and Frederick Phillips a lot to the side and a lot in the back where the barn sits now, and combined them into 3. So it's a bigger lot for my block. It extends back farther than several of the houses on the side of me. In 1859, the Haights sold the house to Scottish immigrant Alexander Slater, who was at that time a finisher in the foundry. And he moves in with his wife and his young children. And their ownership of the property lasts for about 40 years. I'm only going to go to 3 owners, so don't worry, this is not long.
But you know what? If there is one audience that you can sit with, and
Well,
like you're in.
okay. Well, I'm doing the short summary here. So he was 35 when he moved into the house. He has a wife and young children. His family lives there for 40 years, so it's a long tenure for the property. So from 1859 until 1899, he owns the property. Early on in that tenure, he leaves the foundry and he makes a fortune investing in sugar growing in Cuba with a few prominent local merchants. he eventually founds and runs his own sugar plantation there. So, and he changes his occupation from finisher in the census to engineer, because in the newspapers, he's always called the engineer of this plantation that he owns in Cuba. So as the Slater family goes from a finisher in the foundry to a wealthier family, they make changes to the house. So if anybody has ever looked at, have you guys all driven by this house? Everybody thinks it's a little bit of an odd house. I think Carolyn Bashon used to be cranky about it because it has so many weird Victorian additions on the front that I think are amazing and lovely, but they're very different than what the house looked like when it was originally built. Well, the Slater family, as they gain wealth, they begin to appear in the society pages of the Cold Spring Reporter. They're entertaining guests from New York City. That his frequent travels to Cuba, he goes several times a year, are always in the paper. He comes back, he's in good health. He goes, he's in good health. He comes back, he's in good health, etc. So the property itself benefits from this period of prosperity. So I've mapped the changes based on newspaper. There's an improvement section in the Cold Spring Reporter where they say certain improvements, and so I can, using the Sanborn maps, these newspaper sightings and some of the descriptions in the deed, during this tenure I know that they completely built a new roof for the house, and a slate roof single-story addition on the side, sort of the basement side, that the current porch sits over that down, but it wasn't there then. He has a new fence, which had its own article in the paper, I don't know why. And he adds the covered stairway on the front entry. There was no covered stairway initially, and the two-story bay window that's on the front of the house. So there's no porch yet, just the bay window, which is a double. That's toward the end, toward the 1890s, toward the end of his tenure, I believe the bay window was added. So the simple, sort of modest, Greek Revival house becomes sort of a Victorian, Frankenstein a little bit.
Prestige.
By 1899, Alexander Slater, now a widower and with his own grown children, sells the property to newlyweds Sela and Eliza Jane Post. And this is the last owner I will go through.
It's really okay.
These are not the newlyweds you're picturing. Mr. Post was 55 and Mrs. Post was 43. Mr. Post, I found just randomly, had been a boarder in Eliza's family's house, which was the local undertaker, Andrew McIlvery. I can't say the Irish name, sorry, Kathleen. McIlvery. He was a boarder when he was 17 and he just moved to the village from Putnam Valley. In Andrew McIlvery, Eliza's dad's house. Eliza was 6 at the time. And then, I know this from the census, they were living in the same residence. And her dad was a well-known local undertaker. They found each other again in midlife, apparently, I don't know how. And when they moved into my house, their new house in 1899, Mr. Post had just retired after 30 years or more as a well-respected blacksmith in the village with his own shop on Church Street. So right behind C&E Paint, where the church used to be, there's a brick building.
Yeah.
I believe that it's nice and simple. That brick building was,
Very
and
Joe Mullane's
Associated
house.
Barns that I don't think are there anymore, was his black shop. He gives the 30-year venture to his nephew, W.L. Post, which you might recognize in some newspapers. He was an early automobile dealer in town in the 1910s. And he continues to be a blacksmith in this place. He retires, moves into my house with his new 43-year-old bride, and he sort of has this retirement business. He's acquired at least 8 properties in the lower village, so a lot of them you'll know. I have a whole list of them. Several on Church Street and on Kemble and on Garden Street he owns, and so he just spends his retirement having this income come in, income he's already made. They entertain a lot. His clam chowder is in the paper all the time. It's like he is ill. He has diabetes. He can't work anymore, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Post is interesting. His name's Sela L. Post because he was a well-known community officer and volunteer. And I swear to God, he's a friend of the Cold Spring Reporter because they have a billion articles about him. Like when he gets married, the article is this long. When he dies, he has 2 obituaries. One on the day he dies, and one about his funeral, which is unusual in Cold Spring, unless you're like super important or something. I think he just had a friend. But he was a member of the Village Board of Trustees. He was one of the original members of the Board of Education of Haldane School. He was a member, one of the original members of the Cold Spring Fire Company since its inception. He was a member of the Old Homestead Club who came out 70 people in force when he died, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go on, but you get the idea. He was this sort of muckety-muck. He was the roads commissioner for a little while, but he did a terrible job. I was going to tell Bugsy this. And then he lost the job to another guy because people said he stood around too much, but he had diabetes, so anyway, the end of the story is during Sela and Eliza's sort of retirement, newlywed tenure in the house, the carriage barn was built in the back, and the wraparound fancy pants porch was built. So those two things, those two structures kind of go together. Sensible adornments for a newly married couple with a fine carriage that was also in the paper with a canopy on top. And then, lots of friends to chat with from their porch. Unfortunately, his advanced diabetes killed him in 1910, so he wasn't there. He was there about 11 years. The funeral services were held in the house, and like I said, they were largely attended, and I don't know how my house held that many people, but it must have been in the yard, or maybe in the carriage barn. So the following owner, George, of the house, which I won't go into, he also had such a fine carriage that when he bought it, it was noted in the paper. He bought it from Cortland Carriage Company, I think that's right. So that was what was housed in the structure at one point. I don't have a photo of it. And also he was one of the early people that had automobiles, the next owner in the village, because I know this because he donates the automobile to the parades in the Red Cross, and it's always like the automobile is in the parade. So that was probably stored in the barn. And it's in this context that I hope we can understand the barn and how we can responsibly refurbish it. And again, if I ever find photos of it, which I doubt, that could help us too. But since we don't have photos, we're trying to stick with the structure that we do have, which is a contributing structure to the historic district. And we've, I'm glad that Aaron's here because he's heard this a little bit. We have the right on our property because we haven't met coverage, the modern coverage limits, to build a structure of this size, a 1.5 story structure of this size. And instead of building it in the middle of the property where we don't need any variances from the ZBA, like smack in the middle, we would like to just build a small addition to the back of the barn and the back of the property. Beth and Paul have done a lot of work trying to figure out, we've done several different ideas of what would work, and what would look best and what would sort of preserve the Main Street facade of the barn and not overwhelm it, and this was what we come up with, that we thought was well, because I don't know if you want to say more about it.
I don't really have that much to add to the structure. I mean, we're really keeping this sort of vista. This was the path to the barn, and this is like a really important feature, is that the barn still be here. And putting the L towards the back means you don't really see it from, I think it's virtually impossible to see from the street. So it's set back, and it also, since this is a bit of a no man's land back here, it makes the yard more useful.
Do you have photos of that portion of the yard with you tonight?
I did
go far enough.
I do have some, yes, but
Oh, yeah.
they should be in there.
So there's a little cluster of sheds there already, a garage, a shed, and a road plastic shed as well, which we don't really talk about.
But we don't have the, one thing that struck me today when I went for a site visit was how dense the placement of existing outbuildings is. There is already a cluster of outbuildings there.
Which don't belong to your property, belong
No.
to the
So this, if you see
behind?
on the map, this building right here, which was built, I think, in the thirties,
Yeah.
belongs to the property behind you. You should have received a letter from her, Jeff has it if you haven't, who is in full support of this project, and in fact would not like to have the other solutions that you have a letter from this neighbor, and this neighbor, directly adjacent to the property, all supporting the project, and I've talked with them about it, they have
Excuse me,
input on the process.
we haven't received letters. I don't know if they went to
They
the
went,
ZBA
Jeff?
maybe?
Yeah, but they said
Well-
ZBA and HDRB,
Okay,
so.
well, it could have gone to ZBA.
So we'll just have to ask
So
them
you
to
can
All right.
vote it forward.
Before we go any further, how about seeker? Let's.
Oh,
Well, so I did, just for the board's edification, Beth having gone through a type 1, with the changes in the seeker law in the last year, I asked for clarification about demolition. And because the building is less than 4,000 square feet, it does not rise to a type 1, nor does it meet the other thresholds that are part of the new language of the law. So
Less than 4,000 square feet.
less than 4,000 square feet. And so, based on that advice from the attorney, I would vote to classify it as type 2.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch who seconded.
I did.
Thank you.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Kathleen, you said that it was type 2 because
It's less than 4,000 square
that's
feet.
the reason.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
well, and actually, type 1, according to what I saw in the email, was much larger than anything that close to it.
Yeah,
He was talking about the difference of the 4,000 was for whether it was an unlisted
unlisted versus
versus
type
type
2.
2.
Correct.
So it's,
It's gonna be super unusual under the new changes for this board to reach type 1 again. It's more likely that we would end up with a project in an unlisted category, but this one does not rise to that.
Right.
And Lloyd, we'll make sure that you get all of this information for the way through too.
I'm writing it down so I can go look into it.
Right on.
yeah, we're gonna give you a test before the end of the month. Okay. Having gotten that out of the way, I'll open it up to board members as far as questions concerning the application.
I had a
Are we
comment.
talking about the barn first?
Oh, wait, yeah, how do you wanna do you wanna do one piece and then the other?
I think so, because ultimately, the question as far as the barn brings back unfortunate memories, and I'm sure Beth probably remember. So I think that ultimately that's gonna have to be a call on the part of the ZBA as far as allowing this, because you are in 2 setbacks, a side
Well,
yard.
we have been asked for an opinion from the ZBA,
Right.
because modifications in the setbacks have a context difference in this case. So I would say that, yes, we do need to separate it because it is a ZBA conversation as well as ours, but not because we need to wait for them. We've been asked to review it and opine based on the questions they've asked.
Well, essentially, we can review the application and, put a qualification in it, subject to approval by the ZBA. But unfortunately, that is going to be the key here as far as, whether or not it can actually happen is really approval on the part of the ZBA. I mean, we can sit there and we can approve it, but if the
The way that,
ZBA
the way
doesn't.
that, Aaron, you wanna jump in, the way that I understood it is they like my, the problem is, a lot of, you just make sure to explain it, so I don't mess it up,
Well,
but.
can we pause and introduce Lloyd? Lloyd, this is
Sure.
Aaron Wolf, who's the chair of the
Lloyd
ZBA.
Wolf.
Lloyd DeBrise is our new member.
DeBrisier?
DeBrise.
DeBrisier.
We ended our
Not too
long,
picky.
our long, I think it was 2 hours, a long conversation with, before the very patient ZBA by them not liking a few different factors of this plan and not thinking that it was the best way to meet our program while asking for the minimum variance. And, I was trying to state, and I still feel that I feel caught between two boards, because, for example, one way to minimize the variance is to put this addition on the front of the structure, which goes against Department of Interior, standards and your local historic district standards, which ask you to sort of set it off from the main facade of the structure. Or, for example, if you want, one idea was to make the barn a much longer, long structure, and that would reduce this rear yard coverage variance, and that has a consequence for the historic character of the building. And so they were on the merits of the character of the neighborhood and the historic character of the village. They were not liking the application, and I was asking them if you guys could talk about
Well,
that.
Well, I thought that what we're talking about is demolition of the existing structure and construction of something new.
Yes.
So then realistically, modifying it, is there anything magic about the shape of the barn?
I think the location of the barn is what is really important. I think you want to have that context from the street of the barn setback, and that you can actually access the barn from the street. I think it's one of the arguments about, the fabric and reading what was there.
And I would say, it's important to us as the owners of the property to preserve the only historic fabric in the barn is the front facade. That's the only thing that's old. And so preserving that part of it would be the look of that part of it would be, and the location where it is would be the link to the street that we wouldn't want to break.
Well, also you have in this portion of the district, like in other, like I'm thinking about along Stone Street, other areas where we have a high concentration of remaining outbuildings. This is a partially remaining outbuilding because it got rebuilt at some point, but a configuration of structures that read densely because people didn't put structures in the middle of their yard the way these setbacks would have us put this structure in the middle of the yard. I mean, it doesn't make sense functionally, and it doesn't make sense in the context of this block. I do think a site visit is really helpful. So I think Sean went by today. I looked back. If you come from Butterfield Library, there is a cluster of accessory buildings right here and over here. And that it's sort of all of the ancillary uses are concentrated at the rear property lines. So suddenly thrusting an outbuilding into the center of a lot entirely changes, I think, the way those backyards interrelate. So whether it's new construction or you're fixing what's there, I think the context and location is as important to the story of this ancillary structure as the fabric itself. Does anyone else have? I'm the only one talking here.
I agree.
Shut up for a while.
The other thing too, as far as moving the barn is concerned, it's regardless of whether or not it maintains its function as automobile or carriage storage, that's the topology of the building. So to move it out of line with the driveway is such a kind of non-starter as far as I'm concerned. And it does, as Kathleen was saying, it does. So when I was first walking around, I almost kind of couldn't figure out like which building of all the outbuildings, like which buildings belong to which houses, because they are kind of like clustered in their own little neighborhood in a way. And the more kind of prominent view that I found was from 9D because of the parking lot behind Whistling Willie's. You really see the barn right there, and it kind of does create this good kind of this sort of privacy barrier for all of the backyards going up the hill. Obviously there's fencing and all that stuff too, which is smaller, but I would have real, I don't think that makes any sense to move the barn from where it is to appease a zoning code that in lots of ways is totally irrelevant to when this was built and the neighborhood that the zoning code
When it
is
creates a
intended
dead
to protect.
space, it creates a dead space between, the other buildings aren't moving. So you shift this building forward and you have a stretch of yard in an historic ancillary section that's just sort of sitting
Yeah, that really
trapped.
is just not really connecting to anything else.
Right.
And I think it disrupts the view from, it would disrupt the view from the library as well.
Well, and it would be-
Which is a public right of way, the parking lot in the side garden of the library.
Which also has an ancillary shed, although it is a temporary building, behind it, in that area. The gray shed for the library is sitting in its parking area.
Oh, sure.
Just beyond
Yeah,
it.
but that's all the way.
Yeah.
Isn't this the library?
It is, but
It's
if
back
you-
here.
No, it's right down here by the building. You need to, a site visit's really important, I think.
Yeah, and it's also, you know, placing and we've seen this on other applications and other sites throughout the village. Placing an accessory building in the center of a yard makes the building dysfunctional, and makes the yard dysfunctional. So I can't really see any value to the district in moving the barn. As far as the addition going on the side, I think that makes a good point, that by setting it back from the front facade and tucking it into that corner, not that the addition detracts at all from the look of the barn, but it certainly is the least visible place to put it, again, because your real, the most prominent way of seeing the structure, I think, is from 98, and then to a lesser degree from the library. Because once you're on Fishkill, there's so much other sort of stuff occurring in the sightline that you kind of don't even really see it. And you barely even see it from your driveway. So putting the addition onto the side too is kind of the smartest way of
Well, that's the one
dealing
thing
with
that
that.
makes me hesitate about, that the argument you just made is the thing that makes me hesitate about the dormer on the west side, because it reads very much as a barn now. This is certainly not fancy enough that I would be fooled and think, oh, it's a house, but I think that you lose the sense of the structure as barn by adding the dormer here. How does that relate to your floor plan? Is that a height issue for stairs?
For John it is.
For John it is, right.
It's a light issue.
It's a light.
mostly.
But there's so many different barn configurations in the village that go from fancy to plain to
True.
cupolas to turrets. I mean, they have all kinds of different things. So I don't necessarily think that it's out of character for other barns.
I don't think
in
it's
the
out of character for
district.
others as well, but it is, if you're trying to capture the essence of the structure, I think it's out of character with the existing structure. Minding that we don't really know what the original structure was like, and so from that sense, I feel like there is flexibility. The place where I feel we need to be really important about detail is the primary facade. I think you have flexibility elsewhere where the fabric is new. But you are gonna see the dormer from the driveway as well.
Is it the presence of the dormer full stop, or is it the size or the location of it that you have a problem with?
Well, I think what strikes me is right now from from Chestnut, you have a super simple gable roof and a blank wall. And so it reads very much as part of a property facing another direction,
Mm-hmm.
and as a simple barn. And now I think, yes, it's the presence of it at all.
I disagree, because I find that I think the size of it is, and we can debate about the location of it along this span, but the size of it, I think, is so small that it looks like a vent. I mean, it looks like something that was punched into the roof because there was a loft or there was something else happening in the space. I think that the absence of a dormer actually is the thing that makes in its current state, the absence of any sort of a chimney or a dormer or a cupola or any of those things is actually what makes the barn look less historic and more like sort of run-of-the-mill 1990s, quotidian architecture. That doesn't really, that sort of
Alright, that's
belies
an
the
argument I can
history
hear.
of the main structure.
Okay, can I ask Aaron, I mean, what we're hearing here is that realistically, there's no reason to try and comply with the zone. That's, I think what Sean had said.
But qualify that,
let me-
but he's not saying there's no reason, he's saying, given the character of the district, right? Can you restate what you were saying? So
I
that
think,
it's correct? That's not
let me
correct.
ask my question, please.
Sorry.
Let me ask my question.
He's characterized it correctly.
Okay, then ignore what I prefaced it with. My question to you, Aaron, is that, what would be the arguments for complying with the zoning?
I don't think the ZBA has any intention of saying that a rebuilt barn has to comply with the zoning. It's already there. If Jen wants to, she could do that she could put it in the middle of her yard without us. That's not really up to us to say. Our concerns are, so we're not coming here to say, can they move it to the middle of the yard? Not at all. What our concern is about is the extension of the barn into the center of the backyard setback. Greatly increases the coverage there of 10%. It's a 33% increase over what's allowed. It's a 10% increase of what's already there. And it totally blocks off the backyard between the new addition and the existing barn and the property behind it, it's a garage, it's not a barn, sorry. So that's really, I think, the main concern that I'm guessing that a majority of the ZBA have about it. We have not voted, and opinions can certainly change after we hear from them.
So it's more about that east side addition, and it sounds like more of a light and air kind of openness, density.
Yes. So to go into that a little bit more, as you noted, that area of where those backyards come together is already pretty dense with barns, and none of them is up to would meet zoning today if it were new, including the illegal one, which doesn't have a C of O, which you can't see because your barn is fortunately blocking
I
it.
call that one temporary. Instead of temporary structure.
It's gonna be temporary until they replace it with another temporary one or somebody else. So we understand that the code doesn't work for these situations, but we don't wanna make the density worse if we can avoid it. And that's part of our concern also in enlarging the barn back in this already dense area. Some board members did note a problem with or concern with the dormer because it increases the wall of the barn towards Main Street and further blocks off it's higher and it's now wider, higher and wider. It's a higher and wider building blocking off the open area to
Parking lot,
the backyards.
To the parking lot, right, that's what it's
No,
over?
it's if you're standing on Main Street, or if you're standing in the other side in the other yard behind Jen's yard.
Uh-huh. Oh, this
Currently-
portion you mean?
Yeah, currently you've got a, pardon me, I'm not an architect, you've got one roof pointed like this,
Dome.
and now it's gonna be like this.
Right,
And
so this portion is what you're referring to?
Yes,
Would it make, I'm asking a question that is potentially a programmatic intrusion, but I'm gonna ask it because I think we need to think about options. If that cross gable were lower, would that be something that would alleviate those concerns? Or is an addition a non-starter for you, from your board's perspective?
Is any addition, are you asking?
Well,
I don't, I
I'm not-
wouldn't say
I'm
Well,
that.
he's, what Aaron had said is that they're concerned about the increased square footage of the.
yes, that was the first concern, and the second concern was the increase in height. So I'm wondering if the height of the addition or the height of this cross gable, if that were lower, if that would alleviate any of the density concerns. I don't know what that does from a design perspective, I'm just asking that question.
So I can't read the minds of the other board members, of
Mhm.
course, but I can say that, one of them was concerned about the height specifically as related to the cross gable. I don't think we would have a concern about the height if we were just keeping the current gable and raising that up.
And okay, thank you.
Do you have existing drawings also? But,
Yes.
I mean, how much are we going up?
It's going up basic,
1 foot 11 inches. I know
Yeah.
that now.
and the barn doesn't have a foundation. It's built
Yeah.
directly on grade, so that's part of the reason it's degraded so much. And then somebody decided to fix it by pouring concrete around the wood, which helped degrade it even faster.
I think you dealt with this before.
This is a common thing that people like to do, thinking it's good.
They start out as not very good structures to begin with.
That's,
The barns.
so that's the existing plan. There's, this is the existing section. These are the other sections. So for it to actually be a functional structure for use, it needs to go up. Can it go up the minimum it can, so you can occupy this floor, and this central portion is the part that's above 7 feet or above. So it's really a minimal amount that we're raising it to make it functional on both floors. I sort of wanted to address two questions. Like, density is not necessarily bad. So if we're having structures that are together in a cluster and that there's density there, I'm not sure that, like, bringing a longer barn forward would, you're like creating much more shadow that way onto the yards as opposed to making an L. I don't know the effect when you see how far these are from the other houses and you do light studies of them. I think, in January, early morning, you're gonna get the shadow maybe increasing a little bit onto the other properties. But it's really, and the other thing is that's dense with trees, so I'm not sure of the effect. The light and air issue, I have a hard time understanding how it's gonna change this area. It doesn't really seem like, it's not gonna block it from houses. It could have a very minimal effect on like the illegal or temporary shed, but I don't see that as a huge issue. So I think, it would probably be something to look at more as like a study of how it affects the light around it, because I don't think it's gonna have much effect. And, isn't density something that you wanna have in certain areas?
So that's what I was gonna say. My neighbors strongly feel, and after the meeting with the ZBA, I went back and talked to the ones that are on that side. And the thing that we like about our block, and these are the people that live here, and Aaron, you've been invited to Total Twin, so I know that you know, is that the backyards are very open. They're so open that we have a gate, right, where's it at? We've put in a gate, like right here by this shed, it's right in front of this shed, we have a gate here, and we have a gate in this little thing, because this house, and this house, all of our kids basically circulate within our backyards. So preserving that ability to talk to Corey over this fence to talk to Mona, is the openness that I think is more important, and that our neighbors feel that this is literally like a dead zone in our backyard. And hopefully they'll come to the meeting and talk about it next week, but that was some of the feedback that I got.
It's
after
also
the-
very much village living as it has always been. We live densely and we share yards. I mean, you don't live, we've talked about how it's a difficult village to live in if you want privacy, right?
Yeah,
Because it's,
my neighbors can't access their house fills the front of their lot. So if they wanna like dump, grass seed or mulch or something in their backyard, they have to go through my backyard. They can't just I've seen them take wheelbarrows up the hill around, dump it in my yard, and then scrape it into their yard. It's insane. We need a gate. But it's chicken wire right now, so.
The question I have for you, Aaron, is you're adding a bathroom, right?
It has a bathroom
It
currently.
has a bathroom. The existing has a bathroom.
It's not,
There's nothing in the code that says you cannot have a bathroom in an accessory structure. I have read it
Okay.
backwards and forward.
I think
it's a studio, it's her studio.
Yeah, it's a studio.
Okay.
We did that for Steve Rose, we did that for House on Rail, the studio on Railroad Ave. Didn't that have a bathroom, or plumbing of some kind?
No,
It's
it's
just a half bathroom.
It's a sink and a toilet, and there's nothing preventing you from doing that.
Well, I guess the question really is that you essentially have living space in the setback, both the rear yard and the side yard setback.
How is it living space?
Well, you've got a studio. Now, I assume that's one of the reasons why you're raising the ceiling a little bit. And you have toilet facilities.
But a
it's
studio
a workspace.
is a workspace.
Homework.
Yes, yes.
My understanding is you wouldn't call it a dwelling.
Yeah.
You don't have bathing and you don't have cooking. That's what makes a dwelling. And I think, and I'm gonna hopefully state this a little better than I did at the ZBA, but I think it's really important that people are allowed to use these structures for work. It's not a commercial structure, she's using it as a home studio, but there's no office space in Cold Spring. So for someone to rent a studio, they're going to Peekskill, they're going to Beacon, they're going to Newburgh. They're not utilizing Main Street during the day. They're have other rents they have to pay. We don't want to have Cold Spring be a village where everybody goes elsewhere during the day. And just the other issues that make it really important are they get to work at home. So, when you're stuck in the city and you need someone to pick up your kids, you call Jen and John and they go to the school and pick up your kids. It's what makes a village what we all moved here for. And I think we really have to think about that when we're moving forward. Talking about zoning and planning is let people use their accessory structures as places where they can have studios. We want to keep artists in the village. We don't want them to be pushed out by high prices. And we know property prices just keep going up. So I just feel like it's something we all have to think about again and again when we talk about how we utilize these accessory buildings.
It's also
important.
There are two things that you just said that I think are really important. And one of them sort of takes us back to, we are beginning to go back to a place like the village was in the 19th century. We have a period of significance that's 19th century, when people did live and work in the village. We're not necessarily laborers like we were in the days of the foundry, but we have a growing collection of people who are graphic designers and working artists and consultants who have home offices, and finding ways to maintain these structures allows us to extend the life of the buildings in a useful way. So rather than having, a backyard that becomes empty because it's a building no one can use and it rots to the ground because they don't want to invest in a building they can't use properly, we maintain the building and maintain the existing density on the lot in a building that can be used.
No, okay, but the thing is that, let's be realistic about it. We're not maintaining the building. we're rebuilding the building.
It's already been rebuilt.
Agreed, but I mean,
Al, I'm talking about
I'm-
maintaining the
I-
footprint.
but we're not even doing that. And the issue is that, the issue is that if we're going to rebuild it, let's be upfront about it. I mean, why are we sort of couching all of our discussions in these terms that we're trying to save something? We're not, we're
You're trying to save the
reconstructing.
character.
We're reconstructing, a structure that was there, reconfiguring it for a specific purpose. Now, ultimately, that's gonna be the zoning board's decision. Our decision is whether or not this accessory structure as designed by Beth is appropriate to the district. That is what we're supposed to be looking at.
And I
So
think
let's
that's-
look at that.
I think that's part of what we are looking at, because one of the character defining features of this structure, as it exists, is its siting. It is a simple
Okay.
utilitarian structure that has character defining features that are barn doors, gable roof, board and batten siding, and it's siting on the parcel.
Okay, well then let's talk in those terms, as opposed to a lot of the other things that that we've been discussing. Let's talk about and first of all, let's go ahead and divide these two, because one of them is gonna be contingent on the zoning board approval. And so let's talk about the barn, and then we'll talk about the addition. So, since we spent a lot of time already talking about the barn, let's continue and come to a decision on that. Does anybody have any questions concerning this particular design?
I had a question about the lot coverage. You said that you haven't approached what's allowed. What was that?
So there's two,
Except I'd rather not get into that because that's not our issue.
I get it, yeah.
I share concern about the height of the, not so much this portion of the addition where the door is, but its continuation to the west. Minding that it does sit back reasonably from the primary facade. That's something that stands out to me.
Yeah, I think seeing it in a flat elevation, it's a little deceptive of how massive that cross gable is, because clearly the dormer that faces 9D is so much smaller than the
Right.
gable that's coming off the other side. I think it's seeing the west elevation as a whole, kind of shows you how, small it actually is.
True.
And I don't know whether, I mean, I think certainly the east elevation, which is the one that just faces into the adjoining yards, is the least visible from kind of anywhere. So adding a gable where there wasn't a gable, I don't think has a significant effect on it. And as far as the north elevation, which is what you would see from the library, I mean, I think to Beth's point, it's no?
Say that again?
I didn't say anything yet.
Yes,
We have the-
you are right, you will see that from the library. I'm sorry, I had it turned around in my head and I thought,
It's because they look so similar in
Beth,
northeast.
I have a quick question. So the addition,
yes.
I'm just trying to visualize its mass. How?
That's actually what I was gonna ask, so like from
yeah.
kind of coming off of the side of here, are we, the existing building now is
16 feet wide.
16, and you're increasing it,
9 feet, is it correct? Yeah, the addition is 9 foot deep, so it goes right to the corner and not passing the other structure that's there, the green barn.
okay, so the sort of historic volume then is maintaining the same width, you're just increasing the length closer to the house, and then you're adding this addition. I know that it's all one, like, single elevation, but, so basically, in terms of the width, in terms of this, facade, you're increasing the width by about 50%.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
correct.
A little more.
I don't really
You
have.
know,
Yeah.
I think, you know, the business about the fact that this dormer is so small in comparison to this entire addition. And I'm just wondering whether or not, you know, does it serve a purpose? I mean,
The dormer?
yeah.
Well, I think well, I mean, I'm
It's
assuming it
interior
serves the
space.
purpose of adding light and air
You could
to
accomplish
the,
Yeah, but this is not, light and air has to do with livable space, and we're saying that this is not livable space.
I know, but it's still usable space that humans are gonna be in.
Well, humans are gonna,
She
humans
spends more
are in
time in her
offices,
studio probably
they
than in
don't
her
have
bedroom.
windows,
It is,
period.
it's an interesting question, so can I answer the purpose
Yeah.
of it? So it's not only light into the second story, it's actually, if you can see on the plans, so this building exists right next to the dumpster that used to be Whistling Willie's dumpster, right, literally like this far away from it. So we don't wanna put any windows on that side, we're not asking to change that facade. However, that means that you can't really bring any light from the west side into the building. So we don't wanna do any first story build, so the light would come in here, but on the floor of that structure, there's designed to be like a glass floor thing, so that natural light without using electricity could go into the workout space on the bottom too. So it's supposed to bring in some light
that's
from the
what that
western side to the.
That's what this square is?
So, yeah,
So it's a
that's
lay
what it's
light,
designed
so
to.
it's.
Oh.
So instead of, for another solution that we used on our house are those sono tubes that we've used before, which I think are uglier than a dormer and not historic, and this was a small dormer was our solution to it.
If the dormer becomes an issue, I don't really have a problem with it. I mean, would you consider a skylight?
I think a skylight is gonna be.
Worse.
I think you're
a
We
seeing
have
that
three
from
not the
skylights
right
on the
direction
other
to go
side.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're looking at Main Street at a skylight as
Yeah.
opposed to an element.
Would there-
Yeah, but that, you won't see it from Main Street, basically,
Oh
you'll
my
see
gosh,
it,
yes, you
you'll
do.
see it from
Not from
Chestnut.
Main Street, from
From
Main.
Chestnut.
Chestnut.
Yeah.
Nice.
But you
Yeah,
do see it completely from Chestnut.
That's
Yeah.
what I
Right,
meant,
right.
is you
Yeah.
see it
Agreed.
from Chestnut.
Again, I mean, I think the dormer is something which could very, very legitimately be something that had been added in antiquity to this building. I don't think that it's a totally new, I mean, if you were doing, you know, a 20-foot wide studio window to really take advantage of that light, that would be a different evolution of the building, but it seems to me like a pretty legit thing to see on a building
The
of this size.
dormer doesn't bother me because it balances out the roof. If you block out the dormer, it's awkward.
Well, the thing is that that's what you're covering up. Yeah, and the problem is that this is a full dormer, which feeds into this dormer, and this becomes kind of a, you know, sort of a afterthought. I think that if you're talking about light, certainly from the east elevation, you've got double windows in that. So certainly that brings in a lot of light up on the second floor.
What if they put, you know, those long skinny windows that
The clerestory
kind
window.
of see all over town,
You
yeah.
got one over the entry door.
Yeah, see, right
Oh,
there,
but
yeah.
it's
What if you
into
put
the
something
second
there?
floor.
Well, but again, I mean, I think
Yeah.
if it is right along the lot line, then I don't know what the,
Because then you won't be looking at the dumpster, but you'd get some light. Spitballing ideas.
So can you help me understand, I think that you're heading in the direction I was starting to head in earlier about height? Is that what you're raising a
No,
question about?
I think it's not a question of height, it's a question of this winds up being, and if, you know, when you see it, when you think of it in 3 dimensions, this is an L-shaped structure with a little dormer tacked on.
So you're saying they're out of balance with each
Yeah.
other? Okay.
I mean, it's the way you're gonna see this in 3 dimensions, I think is gonna be a problem. I think that this winds up being, it'll look like an afterthought.
You're never
So
gonna
we
see
could
the building in
balance it
3
by
dimensions
putting
in that
more
way.
dormers?
Well, what do you mean?
I think what I'm,
You're never gonna be able to-
You're gonna see it from Main Street. in
But you're
3
never gonna be able to
dimensions.
see the east facade and the west facade of the building at the same time. They're on opposite sides of the building.
what I'm,
I also think that dormers are, I mean, you could balance it by having more dormers on the west side.
Here's an example, 2 examples in the village. This was on Orchard Street, this is recently, these are much smaller structures than my barns, and then this one is on Garden Street. So this is what I really didn't wanna do, which was they have a whole giant, I forgot what you call that kind of a dormer, but on the one side, a shed dormer on the one side. So I didn't wanna make it like a T structure essentially, and so this was a solution to have it be like littler, basically. Although there are plenty of barns in New York State that have this T structure. I mean, that's a normal way to raise the second story of your barn, I guess. But I'm just showing these as context for what it, this is a much bigger dormer than that dormer.
This is also
but-
new construction, it's just outside of the district, that's 18 Orchard is just the one. 16 is the end of the historic district, that's just beyond.
Okay.
So, one of the reasons that
That-
yeah, so that is new construction just on the boundary of the district, and it was purpose-built with that in, that is in the district though, and is obviously on an historic
Right,
frontage.
well, and there's many, I mean, this wonderful one on Fair Street, I brought a whole bunch of structures, there's many complex structures of barns on the
Yeah.
street, and this one, obviously, I don't think there's an argument to make it a complex structure, but
Well,
We're trying to
to
keep
me,
it
it's
sort
not,
of simple.
it's not a question of complexity, it's a question of relative size. Along Chestnut Street, there's that, the garage that works on tractors and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It's right next to the Dunkin' Donuts. It's got these 2 dormers sitting on it, and I remember because that was added, when they came to us, I kept looking at it, they looked awfully strange, and it was just, and the issue is that they're really too small. It is not proportional to the rest of the structure. And I think you're gonna have the same problem here. I think that you've got this shape for the barn, and then you have this L portion of it, and those are large elements. And then you've got this dormer that's tacked on.
And you see so many barns with small dormers. I mean, it's kind of a vernacular of a barn. If you look at barn structures, you have a massive barn with these little dormers on it. So I'm not necessarily thinking that, are you asking for a larger dormer?
can I jump in here? What I
You know?
see, I don't mind the dormer, I find it actually large, not small. It's, it goes up, the ridge line goes up to the center ridge line of the original barn, or the new 1'11" higher. And then growing out of that to the east is the extension. And so I look at it and I wonder, and I don't want to design, but I wonder if there's any value in keeping the existing barn ridge line gable there prominent, and for the dormer and the mass behind to recede a little bit.
That's what I was trying to
Be
say
lower.
earlier, but I did not say it well.
So you see, you sort of see the form of the original structure, and then the rest grows out.
Right,
We're bringing
Yeah,
this
something
down.
like that. And I don't know if that's right, it's just
it's a thought.
something running through my head. So you
Mm-hmm.
gotta read the original intent and then.
that work with the stair on the side? I mean, that would be totally fine with me, but the whole point of putting the side thing on is we need to have a better stair that goes to the upper, so the headroom for the
You have to
stairs.
look at it in section, but it seems like it's possible to bring this down some, so you're really reading this.
But the stairs over here, right, on the other
I
side?
don't know if it's right either, I mean, there's nice.
Oh, you mean-
Lloyd's
simplicity to it.
suggesting
Yeah, yeah.
continuing it
Yeah.
across.
Got it, the lower, the lower.
I think if it were a 2-story building with the attic on top of it, doing something like that to separate the roof lines could be a way of decreasing the mass on the sides. I think in a one-story building with a, you know, a 1.5-story building, it would, I'd be curious to see what it looked like, but I also think it could kind of get into like storybook proportions of like not, of almost being actually too small and also looking too small.
It messes with the
To maintain it
simplicity,
all the
too.
way,
Right.
to maintain it all the way across. If it were just on the dormer side and not on the gable side, it would be less of a issue, but then, of course, then you would have asymmetry there.
Yeah,
But this is
interior.
also just based on loose red drawings on, you know, I didn't see what it actually looked like. But in a way, it also, in a way, by decreasing the height of that ridge, it makes the building more complicated, even though it's shorter.
We could also look
It
at,
seems more fussy and less just kind of streamlined
Mm.
for a building which is supposed to be not
So-
fussy.
Yeah.
yeah,
Utilitarian, yeah.
we could also look at decreasing the height of the dormer only.
Mm-hmm.
That might do the same thing.
All right,
And it
so
will change
do
on
we-
the
do we-
interior as well.
Do we want to give direction to the applicant concerning this, or, I mean, how does everybody feel about?
Well, can we talk about some of the other elements of the barn, of its
Yes, yes,
design?
yes.
Yeah.
I have no problem with the other elements. I think the windows are good.
Dramatic.
I just want to make sure that they're addressed now, if anybody did have a problem. I think the French doors, it definitely speaks to the new part being new and the old part being old.
Mhm.
And your double doors, just like the barn doors.
Yeah.
Um,
And
go
it,
ahead.
yeah, and it breaks down a bit of the, it demonstrates that there are many uses in one building.
Yeah, and the addition is pushed far enough back that I think that should it be built, you know, this kind of falls into shadow. It's not as prominent as it's looking on this drawing. So it lets the original mass kind of have its own prominence.
I still think it's worth everyone making a site,
Visiting,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's making a site visit to see how also this space relates to what's around it. I'm sorry, Lloyd.
No, I agree, I'd like to see it also. I haven't had a chance to get up there, so.
It would be helpful to bring tape measures maybe and kind of block out where the addition is going to exist, I think. So you can
Well-
see how much space it's taking up and how close it is.
It's easy to tell on the site because it goes to the edge of
To the
the barn
garage.
that's there.
Oh, okay.
And then
Oh,
it goes
okay.
16
Couldn't
feet,
see that in
which
the
is
picture.
about half
Okay.
the barn that's there.
Got it.
Is there any, I have a couple questions about materials.
Well, I guess my,
Should we get into that?
huh?
Should we get into material and colors?
Not
No
colors.
colors.
Not yet.
No, we can't talk about colors, it's clearly excluded. Materials, yes.
Do
So,
you,
just wanted to clarify what those are, and I'm looking at the existing picture, and I'm wondering if there's any appetite for saving that, misalignment between the doors and the siding, which is kind of a
No.
character of a barn.
well, I'm not sure that it is actually misaligned. There's a
Is it?
fence that comes up. Are our eyes just fooled because the fence is there? The building extends.
No, it's the
You mean
the
the
battens
battens?
on the door.
Yeah.
I'm talking
Oh,
about
I think it's just
that
because
is
the
aligned.
door is loose when it's hinged.
It's more than that.
No.
Again, I just.
That's
throw it
an
out
interesting,
there.
I didn't even notice it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it is off quite a bit.
I wonder if the doors were originally hung the other way and this one around.
It's possible.
Hmm.
Or they saved the doors and they spaced the battens on the building equally, and it didn't work out the same way.
That's,
Well,
So it'll be board and
because it's
batten.
The
already
spacing of
built.
the batten is off at the door.
With the
But
windows,
anyways,
Yeah.
okay, so I guess the question is, do we want the, you know, let's focus in on what we want the applicant to show on the drawing? Do we want to have a misalignment, or, my personal feeling is that I think it's not critical to me.
Not me.
Can I also
It's just
ask,
a-
just because I'm sure Aaron wants to go, I'm sorry, Aaron.
I always enjoy these meetings, it's
Part
fun.
of the, part of the question before we get into the details of this is, do you guys feel that there's, like, for example, moving this addition to the, flush with the front facade of the structure would be an acceptable solution to this? Because by doing that, we would take it out, we would create this little open area in the rear yard. Do you understand what I'm saying? What-
How would that help?
Can you maybe draw it on top of the
So
site?
if you move the addition flush with the facade,
Jen's gonna,
So if you do this, you are taking this portion out of the rear yard, so you're only
so now
increasing
you're,
the rear yard.
so this would
A
please
little
the
bit,
ZBA, is that why you're suggesting that?
Well, the letter from the
Here,
ZBA to you
let's-
guys
why don't
is
we read-
asking you to.
shall I read it out? The ZBA, it's okay, the ZBA is currently holding a public hearing for the expansion of a barn in the rear yard of 192 Main. Because the applicants have suggested that their plan preserves the historic value of the barn while accomplishing their goals of restoring it and making it a more usable and larger space, we seek your input. The expansion as proposed requires 3 substantial variances. Expanding the barn east into the rear yard setback. This creates building coverage for that area of approximately 41% when 30% is allowed. The expansion requires a large variance to the rear yard setback. The barn sits largely in the side yard setback, 10 feet required for accessory buildings for side and rear. The proposed rebuilt barn raises concerns for us around density in the neighborhood, bulk of the building, openness between properties, and the change in form from a simple barn to a more house-like appearance. While we did not take a vote or even a straw poll on the barn, it seems probable that the majority of the board will not support the plan until these concerns are addressed. In the interest of saving time, please stay in touch. We're scheduled to meet next on April 2nd. If you were to move it forward, it does become a larger visual mass, and you end up with a dead space in the back. I understand how that addresses the the rear yard setback. I don't know, from a utility purpose, it doesn't seem very helpful to do that, and also the point of setting the addition back is that the original portion of the building is distinct from the addition. And the whole point is having it recede and defer to the main mass.
As
And
viewed from the house,
As-
not from the backyard of the library. I mean, we're only concerned
Right.
about the facade of the
Well, no,
building
but if you look back-
as it relates to the house.
if you're walking up Main Street, when you look back down that, I mean, one of the things that's unusual about this lot is that it's so deep and narrow.
Right,
And when you walk up Main Street, you see the full length of the yard.
right, but I think to Beth's
Depth.
earlier point, if the addition is on, if the addition is where it is as drawn, even when you're walking up Main Street, it's going to be not clearly visible from Main Street.
I'm sorry, I thought you meant as drawn as Beth just drew it.
No,
Sorry.
Originally
Going back
drawn.
to the red.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas if it's pulled forward, it's going to be more visible
Right,
from
exactly.
Main Street
Yeah.
and is going to have more of an effect on the.
It's just impractical. It's like you're building this structure that's supposed to work for the family that lives there, and
You're making this part of your backyard sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I would think just from a
weird,
neighborhood. Yeah, I don't think you want to
But
have a
if you
little.
just brought it forward part of the way, so you maintain the barn gable on the back
Mhm.
also.
But I think that the dashed
Like 2 feet
line
or
there
something.
is what shows the setback. Is that right?
It's not the setback, that's the rear
That's
yard.
the
This is
rear
the
yard
rear
setback.
yard setback, this is the 20 feet.
oh,
So if you sort of split the difference.
But you would still need the variance.
So you'd end up with sort of
A T
an arm on the barn.
or an
I-
offset T.
I guess the question that I have is whether or not the south elevation pretty much remains the same, except that you don't really have much of a difference between the wall on the right side and the main portion of the barn.
If you brought it to the front, you would.
Yeah. Or actually, if you moved it like, halfway down.
But what are you gonna do with the roof line then, if you're moving it?
Well, the roof line, just comes in where it comes in. That's, you still can do that. In other words, you take this and you just shift it. And,
Yeah, I think that's what William was just saying, right?
Okay,
right?
but Sela and Eliza would never have done that. I mean, that's a total miscarriage of history to decide that to appease this, it needs to be moved forward.
I know, okay, so, but then this is, this is the barn of its age, of its period.
It's
In
gonna
other
look like a
words, this-
mistake. It's gonna look like a mistake.
Well, okay.
I have a question. How much would you have to put on the front of the barn to get the same area gain from the side addition? How much further would that have to stick out?
Right?
It would have to stick out
11. Right, 'cause it's 2
9
feet plus.
feet.
9
9 feet.
9, 11
Plus the
3/4.
You're talking about a long skinny barn.
Yeah,
I think it's safe to
Oh,
assume
right.
from the Sanborns
Plus
that show the original structure and whatever its facades look like, the footprint of the barn was all the way at the back. It was a carriage house, it probably had a horse in it. They're keeping it back from the residential, the smells and the sounds of the horses back from the residential portion as much as they can. And to move it forward in the yard doesn't.
No, that's not what was asked. Right?
I'd like to address what Erin is saying from a point of view of bringing it forward 9 feet as opposed to putting it off to the side. It really actually affects the light and air much more. You're creating when you're doing it off to the side, you're not
Yeah.
creating
Yeah.
as many shadows, but this is making, a lot more shade
Particularly the
shadow.
way that the sun moves around the
Mhm.
site.
with the west sun.
sure. Just speaking for myself, one of the things that appeals to me more about, so if you want to expanding it forward and not moving it forward, but extending it forward, is that section of the border of your yard borders up against the B1 district, and it's a parking lot, and for 9 feet, you don't have to go up into the next door neighbor's residential yard. So that's kind of one way that I think the zoning board would probably, would be more likely to agree to an expansion of the barn than blocking off 2 residential properties with a solid wall of garage and a barn.
But why do you value the rear yard more than the side yard? So it's a more substantial side yard variance. Why, in this case, I'm asking you this not to be antagonistic,
Sure.
but because, for example, Mona and Greg, who live right here, that blocks their view of the mountain, more, and it creates a wall for all of my neighbors. It actually would be a little bit nicer for us to have more insulation from Willie's dumpster, but as a practical and good neighborly perspective, it's not gonna be supported by my neighbors, and that's our main concern. I did go back, when you said that, and I talked to them about it.
So 9 feet is
Well, it just makes it,
too much.
because
I don't have a
it
good
makes it
sense of
encroach on the other, our other neighbor, who hasn't written you a letter, but the neighbor on this side. Their property corner is right here, so it's gonna go up and I think actually pass over their property corner, so it encroaches on their property now, and it gets closer to them and their backyard.
The dark gray house,
Yeah.
so downslope
yeah.
from you.
Downslope from me. So the vein, it's like, there's it's so many different things that we have to take into account when we do something like this. And I really wanna be a good neighbor, and I wanna satisfy the zoning code, and I wanna satisfy you guys, and I wanna do all these things. But the problem is, I've really thought about this a lot. So all of the windows onto the east side, which affect the privacy of my neighbors, they're new windows looking onto their properties now. Those are a stairwell and bike storage. They're not designed, currently, our current use of the property is just the way that it is. You know, our studio has a window that looks into our property. We're not, and bringing that window further and closer to our other neighbor's backyard is not, they're not gonna like that. I already know that, but I can ask them that. So the idea that this is like the least used space in everybody's view in everybody's yard is where what we've come to. And I really feel that that's true. And if people, you know, if we have to make these changes, I just know that my neighbors are gonna come to the meetings and be mad now. And it's like, it's these sorts of things that I feel like we all have to balance when we're looking at this application. Me too. I mean, I wanna just do what I wanna do, obviously, but I'm trying to be like, you know, satisfy everybody here. And I feel a little bit caught between a rock and a hard place. So that's why I was asking if you guys see it better, like this was one idea, what Aaron just said, making it a longer structure, moving it up to the front of the facade, are the two solutions that we can see. And from a historic board perspective, do you guys feel that those would be more sort of in keeping with the character of the historic district or not?
Well, I stand with what I said a few moments ago, that it brings a barn closer to a residential structure when clearly the goal was to get that carriage barn as far from the residence as possible. So for me, moving it forward brings it into a residential yard space that would not have, it's a relationship that didn't exist between the building.
All right, but we know that this particular lot is a very deep lot. And so, from a historic point of view, how many barns are really that far back?
Good point.
Anybody who has the luxury of a deep
Getting
yard.
it back, yeah.
Okay.
But from a percentage wise, probably not that many, but
All right,
certainly.
but the thing is that the barn right now does not house animals that you're trying to keep the smell from. So to use that as an argument for not.
I think the house is housing the animals, and that's why Jen wants to be.
I won't go there, Sean.
But it does house a workshop, like a woodworking shop, which it probably did at some point. It does, you know, it has uses that you wanna keep, you know, away, basically. I mean, it has to be dumpster compatible because it's right next to a commercial dumpster, so it's back with those uses in the back. I mean, sorry.
Well, I don't think anybody's talking about moving the back wall. I think, you know, the issue is that do we take this area and tack it onto the front? Do we take this area and slide it towards the
Suggestion.
front?
I really feel strongly that all of us who are sitting in this room having this academic conversation about this design need to make a site visit, because there are so many factors and so many surrounding structures that are driving decision making, and I don't think we have a good sense of them in our head to really give good feedback. Right now, I don't feel confident, not because I don't remember in my head the relationship to the gray house, and once you raise it, that gives me something else I want to think about. I don't have confidence to say, move it forward 9 feet, that'll satisfy everything, when it does then change the relationship of the structure to that historic structure.
Okay, so then, are you proposing that we put this off until, let's say, the 25th?
I propose that we table it, or continue it, schedule a site visit, all of us go to the site, have a conversation on the site, and come back to decision making.
But what? But
Anybody have any objection
what are-
to that?
No?
I agree.
I don't have a problem with that. But
Okay.
as far as answering the questions that the ZBA has asked us, are we? I don't think that I need to visit the site to answer those questions.
They don't need to be answered before April 2nd anyway, correct?
Sure, so the purpose of the questions is to save everybody time if there's a solution that can be worked out that makes everybody happy without having to have 2 separate hearings at the ZBA, or to have a vote and then have a second vote.
Right.
So
Ping
it's-
pong.
Yeah, cause that can happen. And our meeting is, would be after this meeting that the site visit and meeting that you suggested, so if you could get something to us by then. What we're really looking for, I think, is similar to what you gave us on 41 Garden, where you said putting on a second floor to that house would be a historical disaster, pretty much. And it doesn't seem like to me this is a historical disaster to bring it forward, but maybe it is. So that's, we're looking for a way to save time, allow Jen to expand her barn, that doesn't create so the ZBA isn't creating precedents and totally blocking off a backyard and going way over the area limit for accessory buildings in the
Mhm.
backyard.
I think this is the best design. I think it has the least amount of impact on the neighbors. You need that stairway there, you know, so to make it usable space, so I think Beth came up with the best possible design for this situation.
I think that we have, that may be the case. It just that I know, for example, with Beth and, with the shed in the back over there, that grew to be something that was all out of proportion to what the issues were. And basically, it was because the
We're gonna have a
neighbors.
public hearing.
Huh?
We're going to be having a public hearing, it's a demolition.
Well, I understand that, and all I'm saying is that, I think that this is where your neighbors would really help out, because basically, the whole point of public hearings, the whole point of these review boards is to make sure that other members of the community are also happy with what's going
Or
on.
that they're heard.
That they're heard, yes.
Yeah, we don't have to be happy.
They don't have to be happy.
Certainly not always happy.
So
Hopefully
should
they're
we-
all happy.
Should we have a site visit? Our next workshop is on the 25th. We have a standards review on the 22nd. Should we have a site visit then?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Are
Yeah,
you
that's a
available
good
on the
idea.
22nd, which is a Sunday
It's a
morning?
Sunday. It would probably be around 1 o'clock.
Probably.
Or we could do it at the beginning, if,
Or, yeah, sure. Or we could do it at 11.
Sorry, one more thing. So Sean, you said much earlier, that the barn as it is kind of looked like a 90s barn, something like that, like it was built in the 90s.
No, I was just saying
I
that
think it was the 1990s, right?
Yeah, I was saying that the fact that it has no, that the roof has no,
appurtenances.
that it's just a
Yeah.
totally flat roof is just.
So that's just like the barn at 21 Parsonage, across from my house, which is essentially the same. It's almost exactly the same size. It's a little bit bigger, which is also pretty old. So, just my point that it doesn't have to. Looking like that doesn't mean it's a modern barn. If I understood your point correctly.
Yes.
The 22nd at 1 o'clock, Sunday.
Either 11 or 1.
Or 11.
Either one is fine.
If we do 1, that gives us a hard stop at 1.
I like that.
Okay.
Could you copy us when you schedule that
Yeah.
in case any of the ZBA wants to go?
Show up and miss. Actually, I think that would be brilliant,
Yeah.
because if anyone can come, there have been a couple of cases where we were both looking at the same project, and it would have been helpful to have an exchange all at one time.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally would welcome that.
Okay.
Yes, it's over the property
I
line.
know, why?
It's existing.
It's like
That's
everything in the village.
existing, Right, but we're moving it,
We're fixed on
on,
that.
we're fixing that.
Well, it's just one of those things which.
But so many things are like that.
Um,
It's,
Okay.
we're not
Thank you.
purposely
Aaron.
doing that, it's
So yeah,
just
that's
the
an
way it is,
It's an existing condition.
yeah. But we are putting it
I
all
know,
on
it's
their
a- it's a-
property.
Right, it's a new building, so.
Oh, that's the
But
side
the
that
new
faces
building
Whistling
isn't
Willows.
proposed.
That's the
Yeah.
existing.
Is that the,
That's the existing
No.
dash line.
dormer, L shape?
No, but the
Line
Dash
existing.
dot
Line of
line.
existing
Yeah.
barn.
Right, and this is the new barn, here's their property line.
This is, it's not over the property line.
That's the roof. right?
That's the roof, yeah, the roof eave.
The roof eave, yeah. Are you saying that shouldn't be over the property line?
Why would you? I mean, you know, all that does is it just, somebody who then doesn't like you will sit there and pick at it because you're over,
So we can
over the
move
property
it-
line.
We can address that.
We can
right?
address
Address
that. We just moved the footprint onto the property. We can move the eave onto the property as well.
Except for
I mean, because you're talking about, you know, building
Future.
foundations, right? I mean, right now it doesn't have any foundations, so you're gonna have to put in new foundations. Right?
Correct.
So, it's a question of shifting over.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, let's talk about the house.
There's so many sheets. Okay.
So can I, it's 1 o'clock on the 22nd, that's what you guys decided on, right?
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
I have exactly 0 concerns about this. I think it
I think it looks
balances
better.
out the
Yeah.
back of the house.
I think the
much-
rear
much better.
elevation looks better than
Yeah.
the
Mhm.
original
Yeah,
rear elevation.
Or the modified elevation,
Yeah.
of the windows.
it's much more balanced.
It's what we should have done in the beginning, but we're trying to
I-
minimize costs.
I guess the question I have is this particular overhang.
Which one? On the proposed west?
Yeah. Obviously, this mass that's being added overhangs.
It's, overhang's like 1 foot 4 inches, which is a small overhang, and it's essential to our plan because it makes it so that there's no other way we can have a legal bedroom, which is 7 feet wide. It's gonna be a tiny slivery legal bedroom, but that's the purpose of asking for that. And we tried to mitigate it by putting the, what are they called?
Brackets.
Cornice bracket
Yeah.
thingies in, which we thought sort of went with the
Mhm.
rest of the, you know, the west facade in particular, which is the visible.
It doesn't bother me.
Well, it's obviously an addition on the house.
Yeah,
And I think tying in the brackets is smart, it just, you know, reconnects it to,
The rest of the
yeah. And, you know, this house has had, as you stated, a lot of little additions over the years.
Oh, you're changing the kitchen window.
No, that's not, that was a mistake.
Oh.
I want to, but John won't let me.
Which one was
The
that?
kitchen window
On the
currently
east,
is the
proposed
only ugly window on our house.
Oh,
and
okay.
oh, it's
so
like
someday we'll
wider.
probably come before you to change that, and
So this new double hung is not,
So that goes
Okay.
away.
it's, yes,
No change.
it's there, there's a double hung, there's a,
There's a
sorry, there's
casement.
a
Casement.
casement there
Right,
without any divided lights at all.
I think how the overhang between the porch level or the sunroom and the second floor, again, is one of those things where looking at it like dead on an elevation, you're seeing it sort of at its most
Mhm.
extreme. But you know, passing by, looking from the front of the house, that distance is going to be kind of less and less noticeable as you like work around the building.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be looking down from an angle, and also the site slopes, as you can see from the rear elevation too. So it's you're going to kind of be looking at it at a funny angle anyway. And in a way, by doing that, it actually relates more to the front porch than
Mm-hmm.
the roof of the existing. What do you? I don't know what you call that. Sunroom, vestibule.
Mm-hmm.
And the main entrance is actually
I don't know
from,
if that helps at all, but you can, this is the
Mhm.
view from Main Street of the west facade, so you can
Right.
kind of see that it's
so
not.
basically it's gonna be added on here.
No,
Mm-hmm.
here, like, in the back.
Right,
So I
yeah,
don't think-
off to the, in other words, you're gonna have a portion that comes out like that towards the west.
Yes, but, what I'm saying is, sorry, that portion is already there, like at the cross gable on our roof, so
Right.
you can't see it. You won't be able to see anything up here. Does that make sense? Like
We're just
So-
extending the
Yeah.
sidewall.
so I'm just trying to show you visibility from the street. You can't see the cross gable and this is this end right here, so where it will be visible, that little overhang, I don't know if it's even gonna be very visible at all. It would be right at this little point right here, basically.
And so the three windows that you're putting on the back are the same three windows that you're taking off of the
Yeah,
existing back?
yes, they're in good shape and they're SDL wood clad on the outside. So,
And you're adding
And they
the,
match, sorry,
yeah, you're adding the vertical mortar to them, or
no, they already have those.
they already have it, okay.
Uh,
Oh, I guess
They
it's
don't
not-
have it in the photo, in the picture, I don't know why, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you can kind of see it in the.
It's already,
photo.
they're
I
the
see it
existing
there.
windows that are there.
and they match the windows
In
that we
same
approved for
proportions.
the
Right.
lower
Yes.
portion of the house. when
This
you
window
infill
right
raised.
here is an original, well, it's not, these actually aren't original windows, but
Sure.
from the turn-of-century window, and it matches. This is the only one, so
Okay.
this new one, and then the three on the back are all the same
And
proportion.
these two that are ganged together, you're gonna be able to separate, they weren't milled as one piece?
Yes, they weren't milled as one piece, we checked on that before.
And what's your, so is this all integrated gutters?
I guess we don't have the gutters on there, no, they match existing, they're in the front of the house, they're
Oh, I see.
integrated, in the back and the sides, they're half-round copper gutters.
So you'll just continue
Continue.
it along this plane
Correct.
here? Okay.
As it's existing.
Do we need to do a secret vote on
We did a secret vote on the whole application.
on the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was just a shed.
And and you're so you're taking off the solar tube. You have two solar tubes now, and you're reincorporating it
On the east.
on the
On the east
east
side of the
side
unit.
of the rear, okay, and so
Yes.
that's the only one that you're putting back in?
I think, if I remember right, there's two, we don't have an overhead
Is this
plan,
right?
do we?
Mhm.
So there's two in a row on the same, you can see the
Oh,
one.
just next to each other,
just-
okay.
Just spaced, evenly spaced out
Yeah.
from each other.
Which I also think wouldn't be visible really from anywhere, because it's the
No, you're behind,
front,
yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, the front elevation will block it from any direction you're walking in. For
Yeah.
being such a prominent house, you actually can hide an awful lot of things.
The only thing that stands out to me, and it's such a minor detail and has such limited visibility, I don't even know if it's worth talking about, you'd see it from the Butterfield parking lot, is the round vent. And I'm wondering if a triangular vent that tucks into the gable, that sits and mimics this shape would be less obvious. It's like it's the one round shape that you have anywhere.
Hmm.
But it's not, obviously not something that
Or maybe
I,
even something that matches the
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 side.
existing, yeah.
that you got.
Oh,
This-
so
the
ugly.
rectangle.
This
Hmm.
one is on Mountain Avenue, that's what I saw around one on Mountain Avenue,
Hmm.
that's why I put it there. But, I mean, I would be amenable to like the square with the hat
Oh, the little gate
that you
from
see,
the
I
Gothic.
see that in a lot of places in the village, if you guys don't like the round. But I really don't like the square, and I'm not an architect, I'm sorry, but I don't like it. And the ones that are here were just weird, random
Mhm.
ones that, I don't know why they got put where they did, but.
Functional.
Do you
Yeah.
need one? Oh,
Attic.
I'd like to have one for ventilation
Yeah,
in the attic.
because this is,
I think it's a code requirement. You have to ventilate the attic.
but I'm saying, but she
There is
already
ventilated
has,
now.
there's already two vents in the attic.
On
But there's
east and
none
west.
on that cross gable side, so
Okay.
that's like kind of a dead, weird zone of air.
Sure.
It
Mhm.
would be better for the structure, I think, if it was
it
ventilated
was
on that side.
There's, this is not a huge thing to me, I raise it, it's on the back facade. There are a number of different shapes around the village, the little Gothic lancet is one, there are triangles, there is a little, I don't know, it's kind of this little vernacular Greekish, Gothic-y,
Quatrefoils.
on, yeah, the quatrefoils on,
Yeah.
on Orchard
bifoil.
Street.
Yep.
So, anyway, it's not a deal breaker. It just, that's the one thing that stands out to me is looking, you've planned so well and you've built such a linear program on the house. It's the one thing that sticks out in my eye.
Yeah, and I guess if you were to do one of those little triangular ones that cuts into the
The gable.
eave, then if at any point you wanted to replace the square ones that you don't like very much, it would give you something to work with.
It's true.
Do you mean the triangles like this or the ones that are like look like a little house?
It's almost like, it almost looks like a trim detail. Like it sits
I know what
higher
you're talking
up?
about. Yeah.
like
Right,
right,
blends in very nicely.
like it comes right below the eave.
The lancets that you're thinking of are like the sort of classic little Gothic revival.
Yeah, they look like
Lines.
little windows.
There's a lot of them on Parsonage
Mhm.
and Parrot, yeah. But this I'm talking about is an actual, like, sits into the gable so that your eye, because it follows the line of the gable, you don't really see it, because it takes the proportion of the gable.
Yeah, usually they're painted like the same color as your
Yeah.
trim board, and it looks, it comes down and then the siding starts below it. So it's not like surrounded by siding, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Have a look and see if,
Okay.
have a look around.
I mean, my concern, I think, would be that then I don't wanna have to replace the ones on the side. They just
You
don't.
don't have to, you're never gonna see
No,
them
no,
together.
you don't have to, but it sounds like you don't like them anyway, so if down the road you
Well,
ever
I don't know.
wanted to.
Okay, I'm gonna look at
You need something to do.
She's making more work.
Yeah. If you just have like, just more money that you wanna spend.
More money and
Just
time.
to replace your vents that are already there.
Okay.
Okay, so as far as this particular portion of the application, do I have a motion?
Well, are we asking for that change?
Well, can I say, could you take a straw poll or whatever based on either that idea or the
Try,
the thingy
or the
that-
Lancet
the
idea?
Lancet idea, which one, are those equally acceptable to both all of you,
What
or?
do you mean by lancet? Just the rectangle with the top?
Yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
house?
I mean, I don't know, I mean,
Cause I see those a lot.
they're everywhere, but this isn't a Gothic house.
Well, it does, but it has these, these funny little, brackets already. It's
Yeah.
not a Gothic house, but, late Greeks and Gothics coexisted.
Okay.
And we have lots around the village of these little sort of Greek
Oh, I
sort
see.
of
You actually have
forms
the
with
tissue for it.
with lancet details.
I mean,
Just
can we
I'd
just,
rather
can we just
see the
approve it
rectangle.
and then?
Yeah.
I'd like the rectangle, just
Yep.
copying what's there rather than adding something new. But
Yeah, I mean, my question is that, I don't think, to me, it doesn't make any difference one way or the other. But if it makes a difference to somebody, let's go ahead and decide on what we would like or what we feel is appropriate, and then, we'll modify the application accordingly.
I'm comfortable with, given historic precedent and occurrence around the village, I'm comfortable with a lancet that you're describing. I'm comfortable with a triangle. I'm comfortable with a rectangle. What I feel hesitant about, given the character of the structure, is the circle. So I am open to a range.
Okay, Lancet
I feel the
Or-
same way.
or the triangle, right?
Right. Or
Or
a
a
rectangle.
Or a
I'm fine with that
rectangle.
too, if that's the direction she decides she wants to go, but it doesn't sound like it.
This is not part of your job.
I.e., I'm not paying you for
This is a
that.
neighbor question, this isn't a,
That gives you 3 choices.
It could be smaller than that, obviously.
Or do you want me to note on
It could be
on
either of
the
these,
application that either of these, any of these are
Yeah.
acceptable?
So
Okay, so with that change,
I move to accept the application as modified for I move 2 things. pulling apart the house and the barn portions of this application,
Well, we've already made that decision.
but we haven't voted to do that. So
Okay.
that's my first motion, and my second motion is to accept the application for the house as modified.
Okay, on the first motion to separate the application into two parts.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So now the second, obviously with the barn, we're gonna have the site visit on Sunday. Now, as far as the application as presented with this modification.
Question, I know we're going back to this, but I have to edit the minutes. We did a secret vote on
The whole project.
the whole, because I have, the reason we declared it type 2 is because the shed is less than 4,000 square feet.
Good point.
So, I mean, and now we have two separate applications, so would we need to do a secret vote on this?
Well, combined, both of them are less than
It's
4,000.
4,000 square feet. And it's a
It applies.
residential.
Okay, so I can say
Yeah.
shed and addition
Right.
are less.
I second the motion to approve the application as modified. And will we get a cut sheet for whatever you decide to use?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We didn't say out loud, but for the public record, the application, the documentation of the application does show wood to match existing siding and trim.
But
And
if it's listed on the
I'm
drawing.
just saying for the camera that's rolling, that we've not discussed materials at all. But the materials match existing.
Okay,
So
all done.
could we just clarify the process for the barn? So there's gonna be a site visit, and then the next meeting is a public hearing, is that correct?
The
Or
next
is there a
meeting is our workshop meeting.
It's actually advertised as we have two applications that we're reviewing that night. It is a voting session.
Oh,
But I think we would have to come back together and determine that the application is ready for a public hearing, right?
right,
Based
but, so during our
25th.
second monthly meeting is when we would, I guess, formally answer our questions and write the memo to the ZBA based on
Which is
the.
after this.
Well,
Just a
I
second.
guess, let me ask the question. Do we really think that we need a public hearing for the barn?
Yes,
Yes.
demolishing a
Yeah.
building in the district.
We're demolishing an accessory building.
Yes, you're still
And we-
demolishing a building in the district. And it is,
We've had
but our
plenty of,
ordinance does not make a distinction between a primary structure and accessory structure for demolition. None.
I think it would be prudent.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
because.
all right.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Al, but
Okay.
I'm someday maybe I'll serve on this board and I'll help. I appreciate what you guys do a lot, but I think, I don't want everybody to knock down their barn, yeah, without a public hearing.
Okay.
And it eliminates any possibility that someone can complain
Yeah.
later.
I think that it increases the likelihood that all of her supportive neighbors will come out on the
Yes.
record and tell us that they think it's a great idea.
So there's the site visit, there is the next meeting, which you will formally say that it should go to public hearing, and then there'll be a public hearing, is that correct?
Question for you though.
Mm.
Does it leave you enough time, based on feedback you get from us and whatever ZBA members join us on the 22nd, to turn something around for the 25th for us to look at and say, yep, this is complete and ready for a public hearing? It's 3 days.
Well,
No, well, we wouldn't be able to have the public hearing on the 25th.
No, but for us to say, for her to come back with modified drawings and us to
Based
look at
on
the
the
drawings
site
and say,
visit.
yep, we're ready to take these drawings to a public hearing.
Oh, I see.
Well, is there any way you could just visit the site next week or something? And I live like 2 blocks away, don't you guys all live in the
I'm
village?
willing to do that.
But we wouldn't be able to,
Doesn't it have to be public?
don't we have to, isn't the whole point of this that we are responding to the letter that the ZBA sent us.
I think it's also for us to get a sense of the
No,
site.
of course it
and-
is, but I'm saying, so if we meet on the site to review it,
Uh-huh.
then aren't we going to have to reconvene afterwards to answer the ZBA's questions in a
On the
memo?
25th, but
Right.
Wait, can we just
But-
back up
yeah.
one
We're just-
minute, because we have a ZBA public hearing on April 2nd.
Right,
Mhm.
that's the problem.
So I think that is,
that's what, the Thursday?
but
Yeah.
we're not gonna have an HDRB public hearing prior to that, correct?
Correct,
Okay.
No.
because you have to, we
So
have to
it
have time
has
for
to be-
notice.
Well, can we have a joint public hearing?
That would be,
I think that would be, their process is so structurally different than ours in
Mhm.
terms of weighing criteria and balancing criteria.
And also, we should be, ultimately for our public hearing, we should be approving a design that is able to be built.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We have to hear.
So we
from
won't conduct our public
ZBA.
hearing until after the
Their decision
Well,
variances
is
have been
ours.
granted.
Well, you don't have to. I mean, it would be nice.
But it
Would
also
be
would be
nice.
helpful to them
But-
and
Well,
not
it
waste
also
their
would
time.
be, yeah, why would we have two public, if we
No,
have a public
no,
hearing
no.
and we approve it.
What I'm saying is that we can approve a design which has qualifications, and the qualification one would be approval by the ZBA.
I don't dispute that,
but-
but ultimately, if they're not approved by the ZBA, then they're gonna have to redesign things.
So why
Agreed.
have a public hearing
Exactly.
twice then?
Agreed. But I'm just responding to
Of
to what you
We
said.
can approve something without ZBA approval. I
Right.
agree.
I would also say you can have a conversation with the ZBA on the 22nd, and then on the 25th, I'm not necessarily gonna take everything you say and put it in a drawing, because I may disagree with what you're saying, and I think it's a conversation.
Right, right,
I
right.
don't, that's not reasonable to think that that's the way we're going to
Oh, no,
work,
I didn't mean to imply that you would-
or that's going to meet their program, or,
Yeah.
or
Sorry.
do anything else. I mean, there's much more to it, so I think there can be the meeting on the 22nd, I'm assuming, is the public coming?
I mean, they
Because
can.
you're all,
They
it'll have to be
they have
noticed,
to,
It'll be posted.
posted.
it'll, yeah, and it has to be open to the public.
It has to be open to the public.
Because basically, we'd have a quorum.
Right,
Anytime you have a quorum, it has to be open to the public,
Well, so is it like another meeting, but on my property?
yes.
I
So
think
then
that
why
we
do we
need
have to
to,
come back again on the 25th?
because we have to take a vote, we can't take a vote out of Village Hall, we have to have a vote here. This is a conversation.
To go to public hearing?
Yeah,
Yes.
correct.
Oh, okay,
Mhm.
sorry.
We're not allowed to vote outside of session here. Beth, I just want to clarify, I wasn't meaning to imply that you would do everything we said after the 22nd.
I
I was
under-
thinking about the use of your time and could you realistically
I
turn around?
understand that,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to imply that, but I was also want to be clear that there's more to the process
Sure,
than
sure, sure.
you guys are on the site, you come back, I mean, there's, there are other issues to
Yeah.
think about. So, I think that, I think it would be prudent for us to be at that visit
Mhm.
as members of the public, and then we can come back and have a conversation. And I'm not necessarily sure, do you need like everything as it's going to the public hearing to say we can go to a public hearing? Or
No,
can we-
basically, what we do is we vote, we say you're ready for, to go to a public hearing. Now, you can go to a public hearing and basically have something entirely different than what we had previously discussed.
And we're discussing
But
again.
ultimately, that's what we vote on.
Right, okay, so it doesn't have to be, so if we came on the 25th and had a discussion, and then we said, okay, we're gonna take this type of advice, or we're gonna modify in this way, or whatever we talk about, then we can vote for it to go to a public hearing, and we're still going to then give you the drawings prior to that,
Right.
but not necessarily that night.
Right.
Yeah, because the
having-
other thing that you have to remember is that at a public hearing, and I actually have seen this, the public may have comments which affect how people would vote on the application.
Yes, of course.
The reason that I asked about readiness is that it may be helpful, depending on the conversation we have on site, it may be helpful and take the conversation forward in a way that's useful for everybody if you're able to visualize some of what gets discussed on the site. That's why I was asking, could you come back with something on the 25th? If people asked to see something differently, could you turn it around that quick?
Yeah, it depends on what they're asked to
Yeah.
see.
Well, let's
I
say
mean,
that this
you
is the
know,
goal, right?
Let's say this is the goal. We'll try to meet this. You know, who knows, and I'll be quarantined at that point, and, you know, whatever. But, let's try to meet the expectations and, you know, we'll do our best.
Can we set
Can I
a,
also say, just, this is me, the only antagonistic thing that I'm gonna say tonight.
Mhm.
But I feel personally strongly that the ZBA is incorrect in what they're requiring me to do. That's their business, it's not your business. However, I don't wanna get into a situation where you're just trying to appease them and making me pay Beth and Paul a lot of money to come back with all these different kinds of designs that we discuss. So, because it's money to me, it's money, I already paid the money to design it, I tried to do this all by myself, and the ZBA made it clear to me that I can't do it all by myself, I need to pay a professional person to be here, so I'm doing that. So in the interest, when you guys are on site, if you keep in mind that every time you ask things of me, it costs me money, and even though it looks like I have a lot of money because I'm doing stupid things after another on my house, I don't. You know, we're talking about taking out a loan. You know, we're normal people. We're not wealthy people. So if you could please just take that into account, and we will try to, if I have to sketch it up myself, we will try to comply with what you'd like us to do. But what I want to know is, what do you think is the best solution to our program, historically speaking, for the character of the historic district on the site? And not that, well, this is okay, what the ZBA maybe is pushing you to do would be okay. I wanna know what you think is the best solution. They wanna know what you think is okay. And
That's
so,
design.
I think that the
that's-
design as
that's
presented,
on-
if it were not
exactly.
the ZBA issue, I feel like we could approve this,
Yeah.
right, well, we'd still have to go to a public hearing, but
Right.
I have no issue with it.
well, and I'm hoping on a personal level, and like as a person who cares about the district, that maybe if they'll come to the site visit too, like, this is not the only time this happens. It happens all the time, and there's a variety of issues involved in it, but the more coordination, the better, you know, because I don't want them, they're asking me to do something that I feel is like against the integrity of the historic district. And I don't want them to ask the next person who's not as pushy or something. You know, I'd like the historic board to be the one that sticks up for the character of the historic district, not the ZBA.
well, the thing,
Even though I respect them and
the,
totally.
the point for the ZBA is the fact that they're just enforcing what the ordinances are now. I mean, it's just like we're enforcing what our ordinances say. And so realistically, I know, they didn't come up with these dimensions arbitrarily. And so if they grant the variance to you, what makes, what prevents somebody else from saying, hey, listen, look what you did over
But they're
here.
not supposed to take precedent into, that's not what they're supposed to do.
You're supposed to-
Yeah.
we're all-
That's, and we all live
legally, they're
happily
not
ever after, we
Yeah,
all
but-
sway back and
But we
forth
all,
and sing
but
kumbaya.
it's-
Okay,
it's- But, I mean.
you
we
know
have to
that
do
it happens that way.
I understand, but we can also, every piece of property, I mean, this is unique. We
That's
know
what the
that
site
all
visit will
these
show
different
them
things
this.
are
It's-
unique,
it's fine.
and we have to look
Yeah.
at them on a case-by-case basis. And I think we just have to continue to push for that, because it's important to look at all these as unique pieces of property in the village that have been formed by this wonderful history that Jen read about, and we look at them that way, and we continue to do that, and
And I agree with you, but the thing that you have to remember is that ultimately, they wind up dealing with all the issues that come up. And so, to sort of put it on them and saying, well, justify the fact that, you're enforcing the
Al, the
regulations.
flip side of this is we are also asked, no,
I
we are also
understand,
asked to think about precedent. And we live in a village
Right.
that cannot exist under the code we have. And so our side of the precedent question is, if you completely meet the code, we have an impact on the character of the district. The district is most of the village. It's about it's not about one or the other, it's about finding a balance.
Agreed, agreed. And all I'm saying is that, I mean, it's just like, it's noted here, the house is non-conforming. And I don't think anybody is sitting there saying, let's move your house back 25 feet because that's what the zoning says. But the thing is that, you know, they have a job just as we have a job. We have to take a look at the historic district aspects of it. They have to look at the zoning, all right?
And
And
together,
so-
we have to come to a decision for a real person who is a
Right.
property owner in our
Right.
district.
Right.
And the
And-
job of the zoning board is to grant variances, is to give relief
Exactly.
from the code.
Right.
It's not to.
This has the least amount of
Yeah.
impact on this little
So
neighborhood.
it's-
Do you know what I
They're there
learned
for.
early on I was told at one point that the only reason that you can grant a zoning variance is because there's some physical aspect to the property that requires it. And
Not
that's-
in an historic district, that is not the only criteria.
Well, I agreed. I'm telling you, you know, where they're coming from ultimately. I
But
mean,
that's the case, that is the case for this application because anyway, I think that.
Yes, we're beating a dead horse.
Yes, but I think that
The
also.
horse has been dead about it.
When you
An
visit
hour.
the site,
Yes.
when you
A
visit the
hundred
site
years
and the
ago
whole
in that
village
barn.
comes to my yard, then you guys can see the very specific and unique characteristics of the site, and that will be very helpful.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes.
You bought it?
The facts
on the
that
bottom.
constitute the
On this,
merits of the
on the
application.
house.
The house,
On the
yeah.
house, yeah,
Okay,
yeah, we just did,
okay.
yeah.
All right. So you got an approval on the house, and the barn will pick up,
In 2 weeks.
yes.
I'm going to keep my packet.
I'm gonna keep mine.
So if
Well,
all,
I gotta process the house.
If we have
Yes.
one
We have
where,
6 of them.
All right, well then, I
can I
need
give
at
you
least,
this part
my
and then
pen.
keep the rest?
if all goes well.
Well, I need-
on the
I need,
22nd and you need
Well,
to
okay,
the
schedule
house
somebody,
drawings.
a
okay, if
public
somebody
hearing,
shows up with
when would that
something
be?
I can
So we
reference.
have
What's
to
your-
advertise.
There we go.
What's your,
I'll piggyback off of Kathleen's or something.
Lloyd.
Can I do it for the site?
No,
I'll give you
no,
mine.
well,
I can get it
you
back.
could, no, you can take it.
It
Take
would
it back there. So I have
We
it.
wouldn't be able to advertise until this
Too much
week.
already.
Okay.
In 7 days, so the week of the 8th. And we have our regular meeting on the 8th anyway. That would be the public hearing.
that's spring break.
Well, yeah, that's when our regular meeting happens. If that doesn't work for you or Beth, we can schedule
It will
another
probably
time.
work because of coronavirus, but.
Right.
But that's what I'm asking, so the next meeting after that,
Yeah,
7th.
no one's going anywhere.
Okay.
The spring break.
So are we still doing a site visit when we said we would?
Yes.
Or- Okay.
Yes.
What, so Al, you just need the drawings?
I need the house drawing.
They have to abandon the campus by
I heard, I forgot about that.
Where?
Stanford did the same thing, they're asking people not to come back for the spring semester.
Cornell has done it too.
I have to pick up Theo on Friday,
From where?
Middlebury.
Oh, did they close the doors?
isn't he? Oh,
my
no
God.
commencement.
They might not have graduation.
Yeah, they probably won't. Yeah.
And they just postponed it? I know some colleges are doing that.
I don't know, they haven't said so far what they're doing.
Oh.
Remember that window?
Oh, no
Doesn't
change.
get to run anymore.
Oh, bummer.
Oh, that's gonna be rough. Well, if he wants to babysit,
Welcome back.
Opportunity.
he's my kid's favorite babysitter.
Thank you guys, sorry it lasted so long.
They always do.
I mean, we've been here till 1 in the morning.
Lloyd is
Don't
new.
do that.
We gotta get the stop it.
Well, thank you sincerely for the work that you guys do.
Thank you
and
for
I'll-
caring
Thank
about your property.
Thanks for being organized.
Yeah.
Do we want the house rock pictures?
Yeah, why don't you put them,
Maybe a
I'll
couple?
attach them.
Put them in the folders.
Just
Yeah.
take a couple and put them in the folders back there. There it is. Just for reference.
No, that's furniture.
That's the wrong one?
Well, the
Sorry.
structures weren't connected.
Oh, yeah.
Clearly.
Not the first time we've seen
Um,
DIY finish off a building.
We'll keep hiring.
This is not for tonight, but I'm just showing you that the 14 Furnace Street application is complete and it's here. This is the one we're looking at on one of the ones we're looking at on the 25th.
Oh, this
Cool.
is the porch.
This is the porch opening. Yeah, it's gonna
So how
change
does
everything
one
about
look
that
at
block.
this
Take a little
outside?
peek.
Yeah. I'm curious.
We have a office, well, we have drawing office. Well, you can,
Yeah, I showed him, he came in
Yeah,
early,
just
and
wanted-
went through where everything is.
Okay.
Business
Minutes?
hours.
Minutes.
Historic
Yeah,
photographs.
so
in
then we
there.
meant to get another,
So the 12th
the
is
twenty, the 12th I wasn't here.
Yeah, I saw this up there a little bit.
I already gave comments on the 12th.
Yep, I have Kathleen's corrections.
When you're reading that, I'll use that.
It's gonna be a lot of work.
22 Parrot Street, is that, what's his name? Who's the applicant?
Mizuka.
Yes, yeah, it was.
Mazuka?
Do you want that in there?
No, it just, it submitted an application, a railing cut sheet, and also, you know, marked up drawing. A marked up photograph.
Sure.
Um,
Andrea,
Uh-huh.
which minutes are you about to consider?
2/12/20.
Thank
Yeah, we're just editing.
Oh, you're not gonna vote on them?
Oh, yeah, we're gonna vote. Yeah, we're just making edits right now. Yeah.
Didn't we also talk about, the budget?
No, that was the next meeting, the
That was the
26th.
next meeting? Okay. All right, that's the only comment I
Great.
have.
Do you need 226 to look at?
What?
226? Do you need that one to look at? That was 212.
Right. Are we also looking at 226?
Yes, please.
Well, I guess the question as far as format goes, in the past, we had listed the applicant's name. Are we not doing that now?
Sometimes I know the people and get the names, sometimes I don't know who it is. I would ask that perhaps we could always do an introduction of the people so I can get the names and the spelling down.
Okay.
5 Cedar Street is Marianne Remy, R-E-M-Y. Is that what you're looking at?
Well, 22 Parrot Street's Mazuka, 16 Orchard Street was the woman who had that, the fence in the backyard.
No, that was, John.
No, John Plummer is 16 Orchard Street.
What was your?
So you want me to put the names in
Offense.
here?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think, it would help.
And
5 Cedar Street.
what is your father's first name, Dennis?
Thank you.
William.
William, of course.
And Mizuki is 2 Z's, 1 C.
Right on.
I see it in the paper often enough. Guessed as much. All right, and then 16, I'm just gonna list that as John Plummer.
16 is John Plummer.
Yeah.
How about 5 Cedar Street?
5 Cedar Street is Marianne, M-A-R-I-A-N-N-E, Remy, R-E-M-Y. Is there another one?
Huh?
That identifies John Van Tassel
Yeah.
as the presenter on that
Well,
one.
but he's not it's the Phillips Town.
It says
Phillipstown.
Phillipstown Town Hall.
Yeah.
For 226, under board business, you just need to correct the spelling of Lloyd's last name.
The space.
It was red.
What?
Lloyd's name is misspelled.
No space. I think that's
What?
all right now.
On the next page.
Isn't it D-E-S?
Oh, there's an S, yeah,
I would move to accept.
DES
Oh,
space,
yes.
or DES, no space.
No
space.
space.
No hyphen either.
okay. My dad would be so happy.
I will move to accept two.
Wait, let me finish.
Happy for hours.
So are we gonna vote on, 226 first?
212, 226.
Yeah, we
Oh,
haven't.
sorry, I thought you were
Let's
done.
vote on
I
212.
thought you were done at 2:12.
212 is
Well,
done, that's just the three of us.
We haven't had a vote on it.
No, I know, I'm just saying all the edits are.
I move to accept the meetings of the 212 meeting as modified.
A second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, those are approved. Those proposed for the north facade, those what?
I don't know what you're talking, can you? The light fixtures, there is no documentation of historic light fixtures, those proposed for the north facade. Andrea, how have you and Michael, because I did this set because you were gone, how have you two worked it out? Do I make the changes and send it on to Al, or do you send it back to Michael to make the changes?
Oh, these edits?
Uh-huh,
I just do them myself,
alright, so,
and then I send them to Al.
cool,
Yeah, I think that's just getting too many
yeah, that's fine,
cooks in the kitchen.
no problem. I'll just, when you're done marking, I'll need to take it back.
And which minutes are we now?
226.
226.
226.
Did we get that?
We have not been told that we don't have it. Al's asking about the funding for the spring conference. It's paid for,
May,
whether or not I
for
get
May.
reimbursed is a different
That's
story.
right.
Mm.
I already talked to Steve about digital files, but he hasn't gotten back to me.
I wanted to, well, when we get to design stuff, when we're done with this, I wanna ask everybody a question. Are we good? 2 pages for the minutes. Will you make the motion, since I've already added them?
Okay, I move that we accept the 20 minutes of 26th as modified.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, you had.
I have a suggestion for the design standards.
Okay.
We have been talking about having Glenn Watson do that map for quite some time. There is another,
I had that.
he's finished it?
Well, he gave it to me. He gave me the map that was in the previous.
Well, we need to have it updated, that's the whole point.
Oh, okay.
We agreed that we were, oh, for the love of God. We agreed that we were making modifications to it.
Yes, and he gave me an AutoCAD file.
Okay, and who do you think's going to do those then?
Well, I've already done one of the changes, because one of them was, we were talking about differentiating or taking away the differentiation between the national and
We have,
No,
we have
had
several
talked about
notes here.
reducing the, we weren't taking it away, we were just reducing the contrast.
This is what we have written down as points to be dealt with in the map, and I was not aware that we were doing it ourselves. The map needs to be reviewed for designation lines, the Grove, the Boulevard, Foundry Dock Park, Chapel Restoration. Separate color for separate color for individual landmarks, question mark. Should have no zoning designations on the map.
Right.
Make reference to where the official map is, because it is a,
Official map.
right, the map.
Right.
So, you're doing the modifications?
I can do it. It's a straight AutoCAD, I think an early AutoCAD version, so certainly I would not have any problem. Lloyd probably could also do it. If there's something that I'm having a particular problem
This,
with.
yeah.
The other question that we had for him too was whether or not he had a layer of street addresses instead of tax maps.
Oh, I
Well,
forgot
except
about
I thought we had talked about that, and you said that we were gonna have a table, that it's a lot easier
Right.
to do it that way,
Mhm.
because,
So that the tax parcel numbers key over to the street address.
To the street addresses.
There are a couple of, not a number, there's a small number of property line modifications, like Butterfield is multiple, the parcel lots on Butterfield are different. It was subdivided into 3 residential and blah, 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 blah. So the Butterfield lines
and also the Grove, that was,
Mhm.
it's probably been, okay.
So those property lines need to be modified, and then, the designation lines, we need to make sure that they are accurate. That was 1999, and the Grove wasn't part of the district. 20, the Boulevard, the national boundary has the national boundary shifted on from the, I don't have the map with me right now. We have notes for needing to move the boundary line around the Grove, 20, the Boulevard, Foundry Dock Park, and the Chapel Restoration.
Okay, because I thought the Grove was already in it.
The Grove is in it. It's just not it's just not noted as a, no,
An individual landmark.
yeah, they're in it.
Okay.
Cause the Grove is within the district, and so is Foundry Park, and so is Chapel Restoration. They're just not noted as individual landmarks.
Okay, so maybe that's
That's
the.
all it was, I think.
Okay, but they're not the only individual landmarks. I mean, this building down here is an individual landmark, at least they've got a plaque on the building.
No, that doesn't mean that it's an individual landmark. That means they
That's correct.
sent money to the National Register
To the
in
National
order to
Register.
allow
And
it.
they got a plaque.
It could very well be a landmark. We would just have to look it up. I don't know if it is or not. The boundaries haven't changed though, have they?
I just, these are notes that we made while reviewing. I just wanna make sure we go back and do all of the things that we
Right.
wanted to
talked
do, and
about.
that means including making sure that the map is correct. As long, I didn't realize that you were working on it. If you're working on it, that's great.
Well, I've got it. I mean, I haven't been, I spent maybe about a half an hour working
Oh,
on it,
okay,
and that's about
because
it.
that's one of the things that needs to be packaged up to give to the graphic designer.
Can we really do the
Except-
property line?
Except she won't know that. I think what we need to do is get from, Beatty
She
Watson.
has not been asked to modify a map. We were told her we were providing her with the images. So
Right.
I don't anticipate that we're giving her anything and saying change anything.
Oh, right, well, I agree with that.
Okay, okay.
I don't think she is, from what I know of graphic artists, they don't deal with AutoCAD.
No.
They deal with InDesign and other publishing.
I got it. I just wanna
Okay.
make sure that somebody is doing that so that it can be sent to her in a
Well,
reasonable amount of time.
That's what I'm saying, I mean, any changes to, the layout as far as lot lines and so on, that has to come from Beatty and Watson. Because they're the ones who do all the surveying in
So-
this area.
So, should you not then have a different starting point, which is not take our map from 1999, but is take the current village map that Beatty and Watson produced for the village and have someone build from there? If there are all of
Could.
these changes,
We had talked about me getting this map
No,
about
no,
a
no.
year
We-
ago.
What we talked about more than a year ago was you asking Glenn Watson to prepare a new map for the design standards, not to give us a copy of the old one.
No, that's not what you said.
Anyone else wanna hop in here?
Yeah, he was, he is supposed to have a map of our village that he is constantly updating
Right.
as, and time anything changes. So I don't know why he couldn't just give us the most up-to-date copy of the map.
Well, he can. I mean, I asked him for a copy of the map from the design standards.
But we don't
But
want that.
We want the current map.
We want the current map.
All right, so then why don't we wait until we're ready to put together this drawing, and then I'll ask him for the current map and ask him.
I'm saying get started on it. We've been talking about this map for,
Okay,
it's been
No.
like the one thing. It's
Nothing is gonna
map.
change between now and the time that we put the map into the layout. So nothing's going to be designated, no borders are going to change.
okay, if you say so,
We are the people who decide if the borders change, so I know that we're not gonna,
No,
we're not gonna
no,
designate
no.
any new landmarks.
no, because lot lines change,
Sure, okay, lot lines may change, but
Which they have to do,
which they have to do.
but we can do them,
Right.
take it and edit the graphics and
I-
make it a
you know-
vector file for the graphic artist and add color.
I've been sitting on that map for about a year.
But you've been telling us that I have to ask him. Al, have you got
No,
a map?
I-
I gotta ask him.
No, I told you guys that I had it. Yes, I did.
It's
Okay.
okay, it's all
As
right.
a matter of fact, I'll dig out the email I sent to you guys.
sure.
Jeez.
Are we done?
Were
Do I have a
you
motion?
gonna send me
I
a
haven't finished
photography
yet.
list?
I haven't finished it yet. I'm
Okay.
almost done.
That's
I
fine.
need through the weekend to finish it.
And I received the
Oh, good.
document, I haven't got very far with it, but.
We're coming back together on that till the 22nd. You got time?
So you're not expecting anything from me for the 22nd then? Unless you get it to me
Unless I
before
get it to
then?
you sooner, yeah.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes, please.
I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
All right, we'll have fun.